I thought I had it all. A perfect wife, two amazing kids, and a bright future. But that illusion shattered on our anniversary. I came home early, only to find my wife tangled in bed with another man. The betrayal was like a knife to the heart. She begged for forgiveness, but I couldn't forgive. Not after 17 years of lies. I left everything behind, moved to a new city, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. Now, with Catalina by my side, I've found real happiness. But the past isn't easily forgotten and the scars remain. This is my story, a journey from devastation to redemption. My name is Nathan Hal. I'm 37 years old and thought my life was on track. I work as a rising bank manager at a big bank. One day I came home early to celebrate our anniversary, but my life took a bad turn. I walked in and found my wife in bed with another man. I will never say her name again, so let's call her Bitch. She had the nerve to tell me to leave so they could finish. I left all right, straight to a motel. I couldn't stand to sleep in that bed or stay in that house again, wondering how many men she had been with behind my back. We got married young, thinking we were in love. I did love her then, but now I doubt she ever loved me. We had a daughter a year into the marriage and a son 2 years later. They are my kids. I had them tested the week after I left their mom. So there I was in my motel room, paid in cash so she couldn't track me. I planned to pay off our shared card and cancel it the next day. I couldn't do much with my money that late at night, so I knew I had to act fast in the morning to protect what I had worked hard for. I wasn't letting her get 1 cent more than she deserved in the divorce. I wanted revenge. I was making calls and searching online for the best divorce lawyer in town. Money wasn't an issue since I made good money and had a promotion coming up. I also knew banking tricks to keep my cash safe. I thought about going home to pack my stuff while she was at work. Whether or not she noticed my things were gone, I didn't care. She tried calling me many times, but I never answered. Then she texted saying I could come home now. She cleaned up and said it meant nothing. Did she not know me at all? As it got later, she started begging, knowing the kids would be home wondering where I was. They'd usually expect me home so we could go out for dinner for our anniversary. Did she really think I'd want to celebrate after catching her with another man? She must be out of her mind. Then my daughter called. It hurt to lie to her, but I wasn't going back home, not that night or ever, except to pack my things. "Hi, honey," I said, trying to stay calm. "Dad? Where are you? Mom's freaking out." Good, I thought. Either she couldn't find me or she was worried I had told the kids what she did. "Sorry, baby, I had to go on a business trip at the last minute. But don't worry, I'm not alone. You remember Miss Tyler?" "Yeah, she was nice, but why are you on a business trip with Miss Tyler?" I grinned when I heard the bitch's "what" in the background. The bitch hated Miss Tyler for no good reason. She was a kind woman and a lesbian. Maybe the bitch feared someone would steal me away. I wish someone had. Then I wouldn't have wasted 17 years with her. "Oh, the speaker for a conference got sick. And since today is such a big day," I said sarcastically, hoping the bitch was listening, "my boss asked if I could help, and Miss Tyler is going too." "But when will you be home?" "I don't know, maybe a week. Miss Tyler wants to explore the city while we're there, so—" Just then, the phone was snatched from my daughter's hand. "Nat, you come home right now." "It's Nathan or Mr. Hal to you," I replied coldly. "You lost all rights to my name when I found you with another man in my bed." "Nat, Nathan, I know you're upset. We can work this out. It meant nothing." "It means something to me, you stupid woman." "Fine. If you want to act like a child and not talk this out like adults, go ahead, stay away, but know this. I am going to be with every man I can from now on in this house." "Go ahead, bitch. You're dead to me now anyway," I said, and hung up. Things went downhill from there. I had movers come in and pack my belongings the next day while she was at work. I stored everything in a unit across town, paying in cash for 3 months until I could find an apartment. My marriage might be over, but I wasn't going to vanish from my kids' lives. I had a meeting with a lawyer the day after I left home. I also closed our shared bank account. I put half the money into an account for her and moved the rest to a place she couldn't touch. It made me laugh. At work, I made a big scene by smashing my wedding ring into a useless piece of metal before throwing it away in front of everyone. If that didn't start some talk, I don't know what would. After talking to my lawyer, she had a private investigator follow my ex. I didn't care, really, I just wanted her gone. But things really exploded when she got served with the papers. I wish I could have seen her face. The private investigator got some juicy details, and I felt so vindictive. If you mess around with a married person, expect payback. From what I heard, those men she messed with ended up with nothing, especially her boss. His wife took him for everything, $20 million. I laughed so hard when I heard that. His wife was smart and had a prenup with a cheating clause. I missed my kids, though. My ex was messing with my visitation days. My lawyer handled it. I didn't need to be there, but I heard the judge warned her that if she missed one more visit, she'd go to jail. The first visit didn't go well. My kids blamed me for breaking up our family. I told them it was their mother's fault without going into too much detail. I explained I caught her with another man in our bed. Then my world fell apart. "Dad, do we have to keep doing this?" my 16-year-old daughter asked as we ate lunch at Hardee's. I noticed my ex still sitting in the parking lot. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked. "I mean, do we have to keep coming on the weekends?" Those words hit me hard. "Do you not want to see me?" I asked calmly as I put my drink down. "I don't mean that, just that we could see each other on birthdays and holidays." "Is this what you want, too?" I asked my almost 14-year-old son. "Dad, why do you have to make a big deal out of it? It's just something that happened. Can't we just go back to the way things were?" My eyebrow twitched when he wouldn't look at me. "So, I'm just the gift giver to you? Is that all I'm good for?" "That doesn't work for me. I'm your father or I am not. Choose," I said firmly. I hoped they wouldn't buy into their mother's lies. I was wrong. "Well, Mom's boyfriend is nice. He takes us places when you aren't." "You knew!" I yelled, knocking my drink off the table. My kids jumped. "Fine. You don't want me as your father anymore, so be it. I have no children now. Have a nice life." With that, I walked out of the restaurant and their lives. Did I hear them calling after me? Yes, but I wasn't about to turn around so they could hurt me more. I was a wreck. I raised those kids, went to every game, cheered them on. That's what a father does. Be there for their kids, at least the ones who care. When the promotion came through, I didn't think twice. Moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, to take over the regional manager position for the Southeast seemed perfect. I sold the bedroom items I bought for my kids. Why keep stuff that only makes you feel worse? Did the kids try to call? Yes, but I didn't answer. If they didn't want me, it'd be better not to hear their voices. A heart can only break so much before it's beyond repair. When it came time to sign the divorce papers, my ex had the nerve to bring her boyfriend along. "This didn't need to happen, Mr. Hal," she said smugly, but her look quickly faded when she saw my anger. "We could have worked things out, but you had to throw away 17 years. "No, you did that the moment you let that guy in," I said. "I wasn't going to let you string me along anymore." "All right, okay, I did. So what? I had a blast." I looked down as my lawyer put her hand on my arm, keeping me calm. "Miss Smith, we aren't here for you to provoke my client. If that's all you're here for, then this meeting is over. We'll see you in court," my lawyer said, gathering her papers. All right, she sighed. The best thing that came out of all this? No alimony. She thought her new boyfriend loved her and planned to marry him even before the ink was dry. Fine, let him keep her. It's his problem now. Taking out my checkbook, I was excited to write one check. It was the full amount for child support for the next 6 years. I handed the check to my lawyer after writing in the memo, "Eat dirt, choke on it, and die." As I signed the divorce papers, I noticed a small smile on my lawyer's face when she saw what I wrote. I pushed the check across the table and stood up. I didn't want to stay in the same room as my ex-wife. I felt so dirty. "What's this?" my ex-wife yelled. "That's the full amount for your child support. Don't expect another check," I heard my lawyer say as I walked out of my old life. "He can't do that," my ex-wife shouted. "There is no law stopping Mr. Hal from paying the full amount for child support all at once," my lawyer replied. "Nathan," my ex-wife screamed again, but I didn't care. That was the last thing she would ever get from me. I gave my lawyer my new address in Charlotte, where the company provided a condo for me. She needed it to send me the divorce decree when it arrived. Honestly, I wished she would burn it. I wanted no reminders that I had been married to someone like her. An hour after signing the divorce papers, I left the city. I had no reason to stay there anymore. My parents kept telling me how upset the kids were when they found out I no longer lived in our old apartment. They went there a few days after I left. I'd like to say that I didn't care, but they were still my kids, even if they didn't want me as their father anymore. It was strange that they went there in the first place, maybe because I hadn't answered their calls for over 3 weeks, or maybe some part of me hoped they realized their mistakes. Either way, it was too late. They made their choice. Now it was time for me to move on with my life. My parents asked me to talk to the kids and give them my new number, which I had changed as soon as I left the city. I firmly said no. They wanted this, not me. Now they had to face the real consequences, even if it hurt me deeply. 7 years later. I'm now 44. Even my wife admits I was a bitter person for the first 2 years in Charlotte. Arriving alone with no wife or kids, I buried myself in work and spent a lot of time at the gym. I gained some weight back then because I had put my family first before myself when it came to going to the gym. How foolish that seemed now, given how it all ended. I met my second wife, Catalina, after 2 years. She was bold, walking into my office and demanding that I get over whatever was bothering me. I almost fell out of my chair laughing at her boldness. I had seen her around, but never really noticed her until then. "So you can laugh and smile," Catalina said with a charming tone. I was instantly interested in her. No one had ever spoken to me like that at work. I had a reputation for being unapproachable. But here was this petite 5'1" woman standing up to me. Catalina had smooth black hair and warm brown eyes that never showed any anger, unlike mine back then. Her smile was something special, and though I tried to be professional, I couldn't help but notice her small but strong presence. "Nathan Hal," I said, standing up. "Catalina Rodriguez," she replied with that bright smile. And just like that, my life began to rebuild at age 39. Don't get the wrong idea. Catalina didn't instantly fall into my arms. It took me 3 months to build a connection with her before she agreed to date me. We shared our pasts and what brought us to Charlotte. She had her own painful story, having caught her ex-fiancé in bed with another man. That surprised me, but cheating is cheating, no matter who it's with. I felt for her and tried to comfort her, saying at least she found out before marriage, unlike me after 17 years. Slowly, my anger faded away. I made sure with HR that our dating wouldn't cause any issues, since we were in different departments. On our 4th date, we finally took the next step in our relationship. Catalina was cautious about getting too close too fast, and I understood because it took me 2 years to trust a woman again. Dating her was very different from being with my ex-wife. When we talked about having kids, I became quiet. She knew I was hiding something. She picked the strangest time to ask me why I wouldn't discuss children, right in the middle of a passionate moment. They disowned me, I admitted, looking away. The pain was still fresh. "What?" Catalina was shocked. Her family was very close-knit, not like mine. By then, I had met her family and they were very nice, even though I knew they were talking about me in Spanish. I didn't tell Catalina that I was taking Spanish classes. I did it because I love her. So when she got mad, I understood what she was calling me. Let's be real. I'm a guy. I can be dumb sometimes. I make mistakes. I'm only human. "Oh, honey," Catalina said softly as she held my face so I could look at her. "I'm sorry they treated you badly." I didn't mind when she held my face to her chest as I told her about my bad day. "Have you ever thought about having more?" My eyes went wide while still looking at her. "Catalina?" I know, but we've been dating for a year now and I'm not getting any younger." She was 33 at the time. "I love listening to you. I love that you let me talk without trying to fix things. You just let me vent." Trust me, she can vent like it's nothing. Don't tell her this, but sometimes I make her mad just to see her get angry. She is really beautiful when she's mad. I know we both have been hurt deeply, but I want this. I want you. "What are you saying, Catalina?" I asked after she let go of my face. I still wanted to be close to her. "I'm saying..." She blushed and looked really cute. "I want to have a baby, and I want you to be the father." Honey, is this the right time to talk about this?" I asked. She often chose the weirdest times to bring up important topics. I had to bite my lip as she shook her head in a playful way. "There's no time like right now to talk about it," she said. "It's why I stopped taking my birth control. I know another woman hurt you. I know it took you a long time to trust me. I knew you had doubts about me, and I never blamed you for that. I also took a while to get closer to you. But haven't I shown you that I'm not like her?" "No, you are nothing like her, that's true," I agreed. "But won't your parents be mad if you have a child out of wedlock?" I knew they were strict Catholics and wouldn't approve. Then I saw her devious grin and realized she had trapped me. "What are you trying to say, Mr. Hal? Are you saying that you want to marry me?" She leaned closer, her hair creating a curtain around us. "If you are, know this. I will be the best wife for you. You will want for nothing. I will take care of everything because I will never give you up." Did I want to be married again? Was I even ready? I wasn't sure. But looking into her brown eyes, I couldn't imagine a future without her. If I said no, it would be the end of us. Losing her would hurt more than my past failed marriage. "Sigh," I said in Spanish. I didn't want to reveal yet that I could say more than just yes or no. I wasn't fully fluent, but I could understand well enough. Her eyes softened and filled with tears of joy, and we embraced tightly. That weekend at Catalina's family gathering, I saw her with her mother, aunts, cousins, and sisters, talking excitedly in Spanish that I couldn't fully understand because her loud uncle drowned out some of the conversation. I was sipping a beer, grateful for the free drink. Suddenly, their faces went from focused to shocked to joyful as they hugged Catalina. Her mother rushed towards me, speaking rapidly in Spanish. I didn't catch everything, but I understood my son, as she kissed my cheeks, tears in her eyes. "I'll only move forward if I have your and Hector's blessing," I said in my best Spanish. Everyone turned to look at me in surprise. Simplified version. They had no clue I could speak their language. I wasn't great at it back then, but I could get by. I could understand it better than I could speak it. "Nathan, honey, when did you learn Spanish?" Catalina asked in English, sounding both amazed and happy. "I think she knew I learned it to understand her better and fit in with her family." "The day you said yes to our first date," I replied in Spanish. I watched as her hands flew to her mouth and happy tears filled her eyes. "Are you fluent?" her mother asked, speaking only in Spanish. "No, I'm still learning. I can understand you, but I can't say everything right." "Yet," I answered, staying in Spanish. "You'll get there." "See, Catalina? He's a keeper, much better than the last one," her mother said with a approving nod. "And I'm never letting him go," Catalina said, dreamy-eyed but serious. From then on, English was not allowed at family gatherings to help me practice Spanish. Catalina took my lessons to a new level. If schools taught like she did, learning a new language would be easier. Though, let's be honest, the way she taught wouldn't be okay for school. Trust me, I learned many new words. When it was time to tell my parents I was getting remarried, I dreaded the trip back after 3.5 years. My daughter might be in college if she went. After what happened at the restaurant, I stayed away from my family. Losing touch with my kids broke my heart. It wasn't a secret I was dating again, but they didn't expect me to show up with Catalina. Were they happy to see me? Yes. Did they push me to contact my kids? Yes. Did I? No way. I wasn't opening that can of worms. They were happy for Catalina and me, but I could see they were sad I wouldn't reach out to my kids. We stayed until Sunday afternoon before heading to the airport. I thought I saw my daughter driving a '96 car. She hit the brakes hard, so maybe it was her. Did I stop? No. 6 months later, Catalina and I got married. I flew my parents in. They weren't happy I didn't invite my kids, but they cut me out first. Why should I include them now? No one knew Catalina was 1 month pregnant. We honeymooned on a cruise. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it was nice. Married life settled in. I knew what to expect. Catalina did not. We both made mistakes, but we are human. Her wild moods drove me nuts, and I'm sure I did the same to her. But we talked through it, like a good couple should. No hiding, no cheating, none of the mess like with my first wife. Then the big day came. Catalina's water broke while she was at her desk. I rushed to her. Our daughter, Alandra, was born at 2 a.m. the next morning, crying loudly with beautiful black hair like her mom. Watching them, I couldn't imagine a better sight than Catalina holding our daughter. "I love you so much," Catalina whispered, holding my hand. "You've given me the best gift." "I love you too, now and forever," I whispered back, touching my forehead to hers before kissing her and our baby. "Can you get our family? They must be eager to know," Catalina said, squeezing my hand. "Sure, honey," I replied, smiling warmly. Her family gathered around the bed, cooing over our daughter. The men congratulated me. I thanked them, but said Catalina did the hard part. I only got a fractured hand. They laughed. Life moved on. I think I didn't sleep for a month in that first year. Alandra was never ignored or brushed off. Catalina's family spoiled her, and I did too. It's a dad's job to spoil his daughter. 3 years later, Alandra was in daycare. I watched the video feed they provided for parents. Catalina often called me to say Alandra was doing something cute. We taught Alandra both English and Spanish. Her mom sang to her in Spanish, and no child wants to miss out on that. Recently, she started mixing Spanish and English using Spanglish. It confused me at first, but I read up on it. Our lives weren't perfect, but they were our lives. Nothing is perfect, but if you work together, stick with each other no matter what, and talk to each other, it can get pretty close. Then my phone rang. I didn't know it, but my past was about to catch up to me. I picked it up and answered without checking who was calling. If I had checked, I might not have answered. "Hello," I said, smiling as I watched Alandra play with her friends. "Dad?" My heart felt like it was beating in my ears. "Dad, please talk to me." "Who is this?" I asked, even though I knew. "Don't you remember my voice, Dad? It's me, your daughter." "The only daughter I have is 4 years old," I said before hanging up. I hated doing that. My phone kept ringing. "Yes?" "Please, Dad, please talk to me." I could hear the tears in her voice. "What do you want, Amber? Is your new stepdad not making you feel comfortable?" I asked, clearly annoyed. "What do you want from the man who raised you when you left him for something else?" "Please, Dad, can we not fight? Please?" Her voice sounded so close to breaking. "Then tell me what you want so I can go back to watching my daughter. I'm getting married." "Well, good for you. Let's hope you aren't like your mother or your husband doesn't look around for someone else. Some of us take marriage vows very seriously." It sounded like someone had taken the phone from Amber. "Mr. Hal, I know you don't know me, but I'm your daughter's fiancé." "Again, I must repeat. I only have one daughter. If you mean the woman on the phone, I'm not her father anymore. That's her choice. So what do you want from me?" I asked, tapping my desk. "Well, she wondered if you would walk her down the aisle. And why can't her stepdad do that? If you mean the man her mom married, that didn't last." "Not surprising. So, what should I tell her?" "Tell her to find someone else. I only have one daughter," I repeated. "And don't call me again." Was I being mean? Maybe. My hurt from their rejection was in my words. I shouldn't have picked up the phone again, but I missed hearing my daughter's voice. "What?" I sighed. "Please, Daddy, don't hang up. I'm sorry, I was foolish. I shouldn't have listened to Mom. She thought if we left, you would come back, but you didn't. And I lost my dad." I rested my elbow on my desk, keeping my fingers over my eyes to stop tears. But it didn't work. Here was my little girl, whom I taught to walk, talk, and have fun with, crying on the other end. "And what do you want from me now?" "I want to be your daughter again. I want to talk to you like before." "I don't know if that can happen. You hurt me deeply. Do you know how awful it is to know your own kids don't want you?" "I know, and I can't apologize enough. But I've missed you so much. I go to Grandpa's every Sunday hoping you called or sent a message, but nothing. Never a word. That's when I knew we messed up. They always tell me you don't want to talk to us, but Daddy, it's been 7 years, and I don't want to miss any more of your life." "And your mother? Who cares what she thinks? She caused this mess in the first place." I had to laugh at that. And where was this fire 7 years ago? I was a kid. I didn't know what Mom did was wrong. I had no idea what love really meant. I couldn't help but smile. "We didn't understand the outcome of following Mom's plan. We just wanted you back. We tried to call you as you walked away, but you never turned around. If you had, you'd have seen how upset we were. We would have taken it all back right then." "How's your brother?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Oh, Carson's doing great. He joined the army to get away from Mom." "He did?" Fear gripped me at the thought of my son far away, in danger. "Yeah, but he says he'll only do 4 years, so he should be out next year." She sounded hopeful. "Dad? Did you get remarried?" "Yeah, why?" "Don't be mad, but I found you on Facebook." It wasn't my page, but one Catalina set up for her relatives in Mexico to see how we were doing and how Alandra was growing. "I wish I could have been there. I bet it was beautiful," she sighed. "So, Dad, what's my sister's name?" "Alandra Hal," I said proudly. "She looks so sweet. I'd like to meet her when you're ready, no rush." I could hear the fear in her voice that if she pushed too much, I'd stop talking to her. Honestly, I couldn't say. I had mixed feelings. "Dad? I want you to meet David. He's a good man. He reminds me of you. Can we come to see you? We promise we won't bother you or your new family. I really want to know them." "I don't know. I'll have to talk to Catalina." "I understand. Please, Dad, don't forget about me." "Amber, I've never forgotten you," I assured her. "How could I? You're my daughter. You're always in my heart." "Oh, Daddy." I heard her sigh and start crying again. Then I heard someone move on the other end of the line. "Mr. Hal, would it be okay if we called you back? Amber needs a moment." I glanced at the clock. It was time to pick up Alandra from daycare. Catalina and I take turns picking her up so we each get some quiet time before coming home to our energetic 4-year-old. Don't get me wrong. I love Alandra so much, but she can be a handful. Growing up is all about testing limits. "I need to pick up my daughter from daycare. She can call me back in an hour," I said, packing my things and closing my briefcase. "I understand. I'll tell her." I took out my cell phone. I opened a file I hadn't looked at in years because it was too painful. A picture of my daughter, taken when she was 14, filled my screen. A tear formed as I traced her face with my thumb, wondering how life might have been different if I had made a different choice that day in the restaurant. I missed them so much. Closing the picture, I dialed my wife's number. "Yes, love?" Catalina's comforting voice came through the phone. "Guess who called me just now?" I replied in Spanish. "We spoke Spanish at work for privacy." "Who?" "My daughter," I heard her gasp. "Are you okay?" She sounded worried. "Honestly, I don't know," I admitted as I walked to the elevator to go down to the daycare on the 5th floor. "What did she want?" "She's getting married and wants to meet you and Alandra," I said as I waited for the elevator. "I see. We'll talk more when I get home. Are you on your way to pick up Alandra?" "Of course, dear," I said with a smile. "Good." Catalina's voice had a loving tone. She always sounded like that when she saw me with Alandra. "I'll be home soon. Do tacos sound good for dinner?" "Honey, if you're cooking, I'll eat 6 of them," I joked. I loved her cooking, even if I didn't like some dishes like refried beans. A smirk formed on my lips hearing her soft laugh. I set down my briefcase and knelt as my daughter came running toward me, shouting, "Daddy!" I hugged Alandra tightly as her little arms wrapped around my neck, just like Amber used to do. "Ready to go home?" I asked. She nodded excitedly. I lifted my 4-year-old in my right arm and nodded to the daycare worker. "Did you have fun today?" I asked as we left. Alandra chatted happily about her day while I carried her to the car. Normally, Catalina and I share a car, but I go in early on my pickup days so I can leave early. "Go put your things away, honey," I said as we entered our 3-bedroom condo. Catalina and I bought it after our honeymoon because the company provided one was too small once Alandra was born. It warmed my heart to hear my daughter's feet running to her room. As I changed out of my suit, my phone rang. "Hello?" I answered as I pulled down my t-shirt. Comfortable clothes are a must when chasing a 4-year-old. "Dad?" My lip trembled hearing my son's voice. "Dad, I have Carson on a 3-way call. He wanted to talk with you too when I told him I reached you." "And how did you get my number?" I asked as I walked to the living room. Alandra sat at the coffee table with her coloring books and crayons. I got her favorite cup from the cabinet, poured apple juice into it, and screwed on the lid with a straw to prevent spills. "Here you go, honey," I said lovingly, setting it in front of her. "Gracias, papi," Alandra said with a big smile. "De nada, mi amor," I replied, seeing her cheeks redden like her mother's. "Dad, who was that?" Carson asked, confused. "My daughter," I said truthfully, sitting on the couch. "Your baby sister," I informed them. Alandra's head snapped up at that. "Papi, do I have a brother?" Alandra asked, switching to English as she often does. "I got used to it, so I just go with it." "You do," I nodded. "And a sister." I smiled, watching my daughter jump from her seat and race around the table. She climbed into my lap. Daddy, I want to hear too, Alandra said, looking up at me with her big, bright eyes. Okay, sweetie, I said, putting my phone on speaker. Carson, Amber, I'd like you to meet your sister, Alandra. Say hi, honey, I encouraged her, rubbing her back. Hi, Alandra said excitedly, bouncing on my leg. English, sweetie. They don't know Spanish, I explained. She nodded, understanding. Hello, little sister, I'm your big sister, Amber said, her voice shaking. Hi, where are you? Are you here? Are you coming over? Alandra asked quickly, excited as always. That would be hard for me, little sis. I'm in California right now, but I would love to meet you, Carson said. I could hear my son holding back his feelings. Amber told me you joined the army. I did. I had to get away from Mom. It got worse after you left. I'll explain later. No, don't. I don't care what happened to her. That's in the past, and I'd rather keep it there, I said firmly. Okay, I heard my son sniffle. So, Dad, I heard you got married again. I did. She's the most amazing woman you'll ever meet, I said proudly. I hope I can, if it's okay with you. I know I said something hurtful that day. For the past 7 years, I've hated myself for it. Can you forgive me? We all handled that day terribly. I let my emotions control me, but I was very hurt. I know, Dad, and we are very sorry. But can we try to rebuild our relationship? David and I want to be part of your lives, Amber cut in. First, answer my question. I found it at Grandpa's one day when I was helping clean a room. They said they wanted to give it to us, but you always told them no. Ah, that was true. I did tell them no many times. Amber, I nodded when Alandra looked at me asking if she said it right. Where do you live? In Dad's old hometown. I never left. Kansas City, honey. I'll show you later, I said when Alandra looked up at me puzzled. Daddy, when can I see my brother and sister? That surprised me. I wasn't expecting her to ask that. Dad, why does she call you Papi? Carson asked, confused. Because she's half Latino, and Papi means dad or father, I explained. Really? You married a Latino woman? I could hear the surprise in my son's voice. I did. Best decision I've ever made, or I wouldn't have this little munchkin, I said, tickling my daughter, loving her giggles. Daddy, stop! Alandra giggled between laughs, and so we sat there chatting for minutes that turned into hours. Carson had to leave for his duty station. We agreed he could call later when he was off duty. Then Amber left after a tearful goodbye. With Alandra standing on the couch between my legs and my chin resting on her shoulder, we took a picture and sent it to them. My son sent one back in his uniform after texting me his number. My boy looked good in it. I was very proud of him, even though I worried. It takes a lot of bravery to do what he does, even if he joined to get away from his mom. Then came a picture of Amber and David snuggled together. I could see my daughter trying not to cry. How she had grown so beautiful while I was away. God, I regret missing these years with them. But what's done is done. All we can do is move forward and try to make up for lost time. Catalina walked in that evening at her usual time, 5:30 on the dot. I never have to worry about her sneaking off like the last one did. No, not Catalina. Her family would disown her if she broke her vows, not that she ever would. That's how much I trust her after those 17 nightmare years. Funny how you don't see the signs until it's all over. My love, I missed you. Catalina sighed as she sank into my lap after hugging our daughter. It was her favorite saying whenever we were apart for a long time. I missed you too, I replied before kissing her. Do you want to talk about today? Catalina whispered in my ear, rubbing my chest. She could tell how torn I was. I think I do, I nodded. My love, Catalina cooed to our daughter, why don't you turn on your cartoons while your daddy and I chat, okay? Okay, Alandra chirped, rushing to turn on the TV. Catalina got up, her hips brushing against me. She took me by the hand, leading me to the kitchen. She liked to talk while she cooked. Plus, I think she knew I watched her while she did. I have to say, who wouldn't admire her? So I stood there watching her prepare dinner. She never lets me cook, says I have no skill in the kitchen. That's fine by me. It means I do the cleanup since she did the cooking. That's what marriage is about, sharing the work equally. Plus, I have to admit she is a much better cook than I am. I noticed how carefully she listened while I talked about the chat Alandra and I had with Carson and Amber. He looks a lot like you, Catalina said sweetly when I showed her a picture Carson had sent me. Don't they look cute together? She added when I showed her a photo of David and Amber. So, honey, what do you want to do? She asked, giving me that familiar look. I knew it bothered her that I wasn't close to my kids, but she never pushed the issue. To her, family should stick together no matter what. Blood is thicker than water, and her family lived by that saying. I want to see my daughter. I want to see my son. I just want to hold them again, I said, raising an eyebrow when Catalina smiled. It's about time, Catalina said, hugging me and giving me a kiss. I know it will take time for you three to reconnect, but I'll be here with you. I'm your wife, and I'll never leave you, she said warmly, looking into my eyes. Are you ready to be a mom to 2 more kids? I asked. Catalina eagerly nodded. She came from a big family and wanted more kids. We were waiting for Alandra to start kindergarten before trying for another, so she wouldn't be overwhelmed. Now call your daughter. I want to talk to her and set a date for their visit, Catalina said, patting my chest. Amber, do you have video calling on your phone? I texted her. Dad? I didn't think you'd contact me so soon. No, not on my phone, but my laptop does. Why? Get it. Someone wants to speak with you, I replied, sharing my Skype ID. I use it to talk to Alandra when I'm out of town for work. Who? Catalina. Okay, hold on, don't go anywhere. Of course she's excited to see her dad, Catalina said lovingly when I showed her Amber's text. Relax, it will be okay, she reassured me as the Skype ringtone played. Dad! Amber exclaimed, the moment our call connected. Hello, honey, I greeted, smiling. Seeing my now 23-year-old daughter made me want to cry. I leaned against the counter so the camera could capture both Catalina and me. Amber, meet Catalina. Catalina, meet my eldest daughter, Amber. I introduced them. Hello, Catalina said warmly. Hello, Amber said with a trembling voice. It's okay to cry. This is a happy moment. Don't hold back, Catalina said kindly. And you must be David? She added, as Amber's fiancé appeared beside her, wrapping his arm around her as tears of joy rolled down her cheeks. I am. It's nice to meet you both, David said politely. I'm sorry. I told myself I wouldn't cry anymore today, Amber said, wiping her eyes. Amber, it's fine. You should cry. It's natural. I hear from your dad that you'd like to visit, Catalina said, giving me a look that said, see? That wasn't so hard. Yes, we would, if that's okay with you. We can find a... I won't have my stepdaughter staying in a cheap motel when we have a perfectly good room here, Catalina interrupted, making Amber gasp. In my family, everyone is welcome, and you are family. I'm sorry it took your dad this long to come around, but he can be stubborn, she said with a teasing smile. We're talking now. That's what matters, Amber said, glancing between us. So, I couldn't help but glance at my wife as she reached for her spice mix for tacos. She caught me and playfully smacked my arm, her cheeks turning red. Even after 5 years, she still had that first date glow. Not this weekend, but next. We're free to fly in for a few, Amber began. No, Catalina interrupted. You must stay a week. How else will we get to know each other? 2 days isn't enough, she said in her motherly tone. When's the wedding? March 16th next year, David answered. Does Alandra have anything planned in the next 3 weeks? Catalina asked, knowing I'd remember. No. Then you fly in on that Saturday and stay till the next Sunday. Since you're joining this family, you must meet everyone, Catalina said as she stirred the sizzling meat with onions and green peppers. Dad, you okay with this? Amber asked nervously. I am. I want to see you, honey. I've missed you so much, I said honestly. And I missed you too, Amber said, fighting her emotions. David, can we? Of course, whatever you want. I couldn't help but feel that David was a good guy, even though no father likes his daughter's boyfriend at first. We just need to ask for the time off. You both work at the same place? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I work as a pharmacy tech, and David is my boss, I said, noticing the affectionate way my daughter looked at David. Remember, we met at work too, Catalina said with a playful smile. You did? Amber asked, clearly interested. It's not a story for little ears, I said, hearing my daughter's fast footsteps approaching. Mama, can I have more juice? Alandra asked, holding out her glass. Of course, my love. Catalina wiped her hands on a towel hanging from the oven handle. "Papi, who are you talking to?" Alandra asked, looking up at me as I held my phone. Amber cupped her mouth with her hands as Alandra stood before me. "Your sister," I replied, smiling at my daughter. "Really?" Alandra squealed. "Hi!" She waved excitedly. "Hello, Alandra, nice to see you," Amber said kindly. "You look so pretty. Are you coming to visit us?" Alandra asked eagerly. "Very soon, and thank you, you're adorable," Amber smiled. "I know," Alandra said with a big grin, soaking up the compliment. "Alandra, why don't you watch your show while we finish talking?" Catalina said gently, giving Alandra her drink. "Bye, big sister." Alandra waved at the phone and scampered back to the living room. A few minutes later, she came running back with a drawing. "Look, Papi," she said excitedly, holding up a picture with 5 stick figures under a blue sun. "What do you have there, sweetheart?" I asked as Catalina looked too. "A picture of all of us," Alandra said proudly. "Oh? Mm-hmm. That's you, Mama, my brother and sister, and that's me." Alandra pointed to each person. "But why is the sun blue?" "Because it's pretty," Alandra said confidently. It made sense to her, and I wasn't going to criticize her art. That would be unfair as a father. "Should we put it on the fridge for your sister to see when she comes?" I suggested. Alandra nodded enthusiastically. "Go on, let Papi and I finish talking with your sister," Catalina said, leading Alandra out of the kitchen after she had hung the picture on the fridge. "Okay, dinner is almost ready. We must say goodbye for now." "It was very nice meeting you. I've wanted to since your father told me about you, but you know how stubborn he can be," Catalina said, making Amber laugh. "Have a good night and don't hesitate to call." "We will. Bye, Dad. I love you. We'll call when we have news about our vacation," Amber said, kissing her fingers and touching the screen. "Now the handsome father should set the table," Catalina said, giving me a knowing look. Dinner was amazing. I ate 4 tacos that night. Afterward, I took Alandra to her room while my wife walked slowly to our bedroom. I watched as she unzipped her skirt, letting it drop to the floor. She looked beautiful. I felt a strong desire as I knew what awaited me. It was the longest 20 minutes, knowing my lovely wife was getting ready. The sweet scent she wore filled the room. Sometimes we didn't have time for these moments with a young child to care for. There she was, standing by the doorframe. My eyes moved over her body, seeing her lightly trimmed hair and toned legs. Her touch felt incredible. "Ready for the ride of your life?" Catalina asked in a sultry voice, her eyes scanning my body as I quickly undressed. "Take me to heaven," I replied, seeing the passion in her eyes. The next day, Carson called. He apologized for not calling the night before, realizing it was late on our side. We talked for hours, so I didn't get much done at work. Luckily, as the boss, I could. Alandra often asked when her sister was coming, so when Amber and David flew in, I left our condo early. Catalina wanted to join, but waking up Alandra at 5 on a Saturday was impossible. Driving to the airport, I was nervous. I watched the arrival board pacing. TSA agents noticed, but didn't approach. Then I saw Amber and David. Amber saw me and ran towards me. "Dad!" Amber cried, hugging me tight. I hugged her back just as hard. It had been 7 years since I last saw her. We hugged for 5 minutes, despite the looks from others. David waited patiently. He was tall, neatly dressed, and made a good impression. "Dad, meet David," Amber said, introducing her fiancé. "David Callister," he said, shaking my hand. "Nathan Hal," I replied, noting his firm handshake. "Dad? Where are the others?" Amber asked, looking around. "It's hard to wake a 4-year-old at 5 in the morning without cartoons," I explained. "Catalina stayed at home with her." "Right," Amber said, looking a bit shy. "Are these all your bags?" I asked, noticing David holding one suitcase by its long handles. "Yes, sir," David replied politely. "Okay, my car's this way," I said, nodding toward the exit. Halfway to my car, my phone rang in my pocket. "Hey, honey," I answered when I saw my wife's name on the screen. "Hi, love. Are they here yet?" I could hear her moving around in the kitchen. "Yes, we're walking to the car now. We should be home in about 30 minutes, depending on traffic," I said, pressing the button on my key fob to unlock the car. "Great. I'll start breakfast and make some coffee. Can Amber eat eggs?" "Let me ask David," I said, turning back to the 2 behind me. "Are you allergic to eggs?" "No, love them," David said with a big smile. He can eat eggs, I said, knowing what she had in mind. Good. The veggies will take a bit to cook, so we'll be ready when you get home. Drive safe, sweetheart, she said warmly. Always, honey, I replied while opening the trunk. I love you. I love you too, she answered. Dad, when did you learn Spanish? Amber asked as David put their bags in the trunk. After I asked Catalina out on our first date, I admitted. Oh. Amber's eyes widened. You must have really liked her to learn it. Yeah, I was really taken by her, just don't tell her that, I said with a warm smile. Does she know? Amber asked as David closed the trunk. Yes, I said, walking to the driver's door. Did you ever do that for... Amber started to ask, but I cut her off with a sharp look. I did everything to make that woman happy, but it was never enough for her, I said angrily. Sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have brought it up, Amber said, shaking her head. I promised I wouldn't, but... It's okay, Amber. As long as you don't bring it up again, I said, stopping myself from calling her mother a bad name. I promise I won't, she said sincerely. Well, get in. I don't want to miss breakfast, I said. And it was true, Catalina was a great cook. Dad, didn't you get a house? Amber asked as we parked at my condo complex. Been there, done that. No lawn to mow here, and it's close to work. Plus, the taxes are too high to buy a house in this city, I said jokingly. So, David, are you both looking to buy a place? I asked with a mischievous smile, causing David to hit his head on the trunk lid. You're not living together without being married, are you? I teased. Dad? Amber said with a tone I hadn't heard in years. Don't bug David, he's a good man, she said, crossing her arms sternly. Couldn't help it, I said, shutting the trunk. It's fine, honey. Your dad is just checking me out. I'd do the same, David said, nodding at me. Smart boy. Maybe there's hope for him, I thought to myself. If you need to work out, there's a gym on the ground floor. If anyone bugs you, just say you're guests of 1003, I said, leading them inside. They nodded in understanding. I wasn't going to say anything, but you look good, Dad. I don't remember you being so thin, Amber said as we headed to the elevator. Well, I had 2 kids to raise, and going to the gym wasn't a priority, I said, pressing the button. Can I ask, mister? Call me Nathan, I interrupted. Can I ask, Nathan, when you married Catalina, did you get into the Latin culture? Did I say something wrong? David asked when he saw my frown. I'll tell you this once. Do not call them that word. They hate it. It's like calling a black person the N-word. Use Latino or Latina, nothing else. Got it? I said firmly. I meant no offense, David said quickly. I know, but it's better I tell you now than you say it in front of Catalina or her family. They wouldn't like it. They feel it's like trying to erase their culture, I explained, thinking of a rant I had heard Catalina give about it before. David nodded, understanding the seriousness of my words. Some people just don't think straight, I guess. I get it. No wonder Pablo always gives me dirty looks, I heard David whisper from behind as I stepped into the elevator. Catalina and Alandra can both speak and understand English, but if you can't speak Spanish, just don't try, I said, seeing their nods in the reflection of the elevator door while pressing the button for my floor. When I got home, my face lit up. My wife Catalina and our daughter Alandra, still in their pajamas, were waiting for me. I gave Catalina my usual kiss, and Alandra hugged my legs. I stepped aside to introduce them properly to my older daughter and her fiancé. Amber, David, meet my wife Catalina, I said, hugging Catalina, and my daughter, your sister, Alandra. I watched Amber kneel and hold out her arms to Alandra. Hello, baby sister. I'm so happy to see you, Amber whispered, hugging and gently rocking Alandra. Hello, Mrs. Hal, David said, holding out his hand to Catalina. Catalina, please. We're family, Catalina said, hugging David. I saw he was surprised. Nat, why don't you show them to their room and I'll start making omelets? Hope you two are hungry, I said, leading them to the guest room with Alandra running ahead. What are you up to, you little goof? I teased as Alandra danced in front of the door. Nothing, Alandra replied with her big smile. When you're done unpacking, there's coffee in the kitchen, I said, standing in the doorway with Alandra holding my hand. We will. We skipped breakfast to catch our flight, Amber said, putting her suitcase on the bed. Great, because Catalina likes making big meals. It reminds her of her childhood. Let's give them some space, I said, patting Alandra's hand. See Papi, Alandra said, looking up at me. He seems nice, Catalina said as I walked into the kitchen while Alandra went to watch her favorite show. He is a very polite guy, I said, getting mugs for everyone. It smells wonderful in here, Amber said behind me. I thought she would be unpacking. Couldn't wait for the coffee, didn't want to fall asleep before breakfast, she said, like she read my mind. Thank you, Catalina said, proud of her cooking. I watched as Amber's eyes lit up when I set a fresh cup before her. Creamer is in the fridge, or there's milk, and here's the sugar, I said, pushing the dish towards her. Thanks, Dad. This is perfect, Amber sighed, smelling the coffee. She mouthed a thank you to Catalina, who nodded in return. Amber quickly fixed her coffee the way she liked it. So good, she murmured into her cup. Thank you. My cousin owns a coffee farm in Mexico and sends us a couple of bags each month because your father loves coffee, Catalina said with a knowing smile. It's true. Her cousin likes me because I helped save his business 2 years ago. Now I own a small part of the farm and get free coffee. Not a bad deal. Really? Amber looked at me. Oh yes, your father is very kind, Catalina said with a smile as she made the omelets, adding caramelized onions, roasted peppers, and tomatoes. She made a smaller one for Alandra, knowing she wouldn't finish a big one. My eyes couldn't help but follow Catalina as she bent down to get the croissants from the oven. I love admiring my wife's figure. Now, Nat, be useful and take these to the table, Catalina teased, handing me 2 plates. Alandra, come to the table, I called, seeing her glued to the TV. See, Papi, Alandra said, sliding off the couch and hurrying to her usual spot. Gracias, Papi, she said with a loving smile when I set her chocolate milk before her. You're welcome, honey, I whispered, kissing her head. I noticed Alandra nodded eagerly when Amber asked to sit next to her. Oh, this is so good, Amber said. I hope it's not too spicy for you. Your father doesn't like a lot of spice, Catalina said kindly. No, it's got just the right kick, Amber said. I wouldn't mind some spice. Thank you, David said with a smile when Catalina handed him a bottle of hot sauce. It's hot, so use it sparingly. I'm used to it, she said. Thank you, David replied, taking the bottle. I watched David take a small bite of his omelet to test the taste. Are you okay? Catalina asked, patting David's back as he felt the heat of the sauce. Never better. What's it called again? David asked, not seeming upset but adding more sauce to his omelet. It's called El Yucateco Black Label Reserve Chili Habanero Hot Sauce, Catalina said. I order it from Mexico. It's pretty hot, but not the hottest. Do you like it? Oh yeah, much better than Tabasco sauce, David said with a nod. Great. You'll love our family get-together then. Everyone brings their favorite hot sauce, Catalina said, smiling happily. We're going to the zoo in Asheville tomorrow. Would you two like to come with us? I asked, noticing Alandra getting excited. Only if we won't be a bother to you 3, Amber said, looking around shyly. Amber, you're not a bother. You're family. Never think that, Catalina said in a motherly tone. Catalina comes from a big family and prefers a full house. Though she loves us deeply, I know she enjoys having more people around. She has been so excited all week with everyone here. So, how did you two meet? Catalina asked, settling into her chair on our balcony and sipping her coffee. David was already working at the store when I got hired to work in the pharmacy as the assistant manager, Amber said, sitting at the small round table with us while Alandra watched her cartoons. Worked your way up, huh? I said, and David nodded. I respect that. What are your plans for the future? I plan to get more experience for a few years and then aim for a corporate job at the company, David said, and I nodded in approval. Do they have a training program for that? Catalina asked, resting her hand on my leg. They do, but I want to be sure they won't turn me down. That's why I'll wait a few more years, David explained, sipping his coffee. Sounds smart, I nodded. I knew if he were in my bank region, I'd also look for someone with a bit more experience before promoting them. So, how did you two meet? Amber asked, her eyes moving between Catalina and me. We looked at each other, silently deciding who would tell the story. In the end, I thought Catalina telling it would be funnier. Well, we have to go back to when your father first arrived here. At the time, I was engaged to someone else, but he wasn't loyal, Catalina began, with David nodding in understanding. I always saw your father walking around with a grumpy face. I mean, he is handsome, but I was engaged and I don't cheat. I noticed Amber lowering her head. Over 2 years, his grumpy face stayed. One day I walked into his office. I had been single for a few months and told him to cheer up, and who knew he could laugh? She teased me. Then we became friends. I know he wanted more, but he was patient. 3 months later, we had our first date, and we've been together since, Catalina said, looking at me lovingly. So I thought we'd explore the city today if you're not too tired. Then we'll come back and I'll cook a big dinner, Catalina suggested eagerly. Oh, you've never been to the beach? I said, seeing my daughter's eyes light up. Since we have the week off, why don't we go to Roberto's place if he'll let us use it for a few days? I asked, looking at my wife. Are you sure? They're here, and it's easier to go to the beach here than in Kansas City, I said. You know I'm fine with it. Alandra will be thrilled to go, but you need to talk to Roberto, Catalina said. I know, I nodded. I knew Roberto respected it more if the person with the idea asked. I'll go make the call, I said, standing up. The city sounds faded as I closed the sliding door. You enjoying your show, Munchkin? Alandra hummed, her eyes glued to the TV like every Saturday morning. I grabbed my phone after it charged. Scrolling through my contacts, I found Roberto's name. Buenos dias, Nathan. Roberto's thick, accented voice answered. Good morning, Roberto, I greeted him. He didn't mind if I spoke English. I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Oh? He switched to English. All of Catalina's family could speak English, but they pretended not to when someone was making a fool of themselves. I watched a few times when some traveling salesman tried to sell his items without outright insulting anyone's intelligence. But you could tell what the man was doing. It was always really funny when the women joined in, and then the teens would join too, making the salesman rush back to his car. Yeah, I was wondering if Catalina and I could use your place at Canadian Hole, I said. My daughter instantly perked up in her seat, excited by what I had just said. I tried to pretend I didn't see how happy she was. Of course you can, buddy. What's the occasion? He had a reason to ask, since we usually went to the mountains for vacations because it was cheaper and fewer people were around. We only went to the beach when the whole family went to Canadian Hole. My eldest daughter flew in with her fiancé, and she's never seen the ocean, I said honestly. The whole family knew we had been apart for a while, but understood why I left. That's great news. Are you bringing them next weekend? He asked me in Spanish. Yes, I answered. I heard my sister-in-law's voice in the background asking what got him so excited. Then I heard her cheerful voice as he told her the news. Soon her voice drifted away, and I knew that in less than 10 minutes the whole family would know. Do you want me to bring the keys over? No, we'll pick them up when we show them around the city, maybe around 1. I kept talking, still ignoring my daughter's happy dance on the couch. Ciro has a game today, but I'll leave them. My brother-in-law told me where he would hide the spare house key. Tell Ciro I'll be cheering for him. I expect 5 home runs, I said, and he laughed. I knew Ciro could go pro. He was just that good, and I wished him all the best. I will. I hope she enjoys the beach. Me too, I said before ending the call. Daddy, are we going to the beach? Alandra asked eagerly. We are, I said, putting my phone in my pocket, smiling at my daughter's excitement. When? I was thinking we go on Monday and stay at the beach until Thursday. How does that sound, Princess? I grinned as Alandra nodded quickly. Now behave and enjoy your show, I said before stepping out onto the balcony. Catalina placed her hand on my back as I sat down. Hours later, we were driving through the streets of Charlotte. Alandra was in the back seat with David and Amber, pointing out her favorite spots, especially the Discovery Place. It was a bit pricey, but worth it for a curious 4-year-old. At lunchtime, we stopped at a popular restaurant downtown. I watched as my 2 daughters chatted. My wife looked happy and content as she watched them. David and I talked about his 401k. I'm not a stock trader, but I know a bit about it, so I gave him some tips. He listened closely, planning for the future. I hope he and Amber don't end up like me and her mom. David is a good guy. Don't tell him I said that. I'm glad Amber found someone decent. After lunch, we headed to Roberto's place. David and Amber looked confused when we pulled up to his house in Dorita. I told them to wait in the car before hopping out and finding the spot Roberto told me about. It didn't take long to find the keys. A warmth spread through me as I read the note Roberto and Catalina's sister left. They wrote in English for me. I was touched by their words. When I started dating Catalina, her sister sized me up and warned me not to hurt her. Over time, they warmed up to me. They were always ready to help when Catalina needed it, especially when Alandra was born. Having your first child is really stressful. Catalina used to worry a lot about being a good mom, so I'd call in help and take her out to show her she was doing a great job. As night came to Charlotte, my little family gathered in the living room to watch a movie together. It doesn't really matter what you do, as long as you do it together. When it was Alandra's bedtime, I saw Amber and David nodding off. They had been up early to catch their flight. Catalina gave me a look that said, "Go do your dad thing." I watched as she took Alandra to her room. "Amber," I whispered, lightly shaking her awake. "Dad?" My mind flashed back to when she was a little girl with that sleepy voice. "Let's get you two to bed," I said, seeing her eyes half open. "Sorry, I die." David started to apologize, but I waved it off. "It's okay. Don't worry about it," I said lightly. As soon as Amber stood up, she gave me a hug. "I've missed this for 7 years," Amber said softly into my chest. "Good night, Dad," she added, kissing my left cheek before putting her arm around David. I lay in bed, waiting for Catalina. She came in after only 15 minutes, which was fast for her. It showed she was really tired. I smiled as Catalina walked by, heading to the bathroom. She had that warm and loving smile that always made me happy. When she came out in her nightwear, those eyes of hers saw my smile, and her smile grew warmer. It felt wonderful when she got into bed next to me. "I hope my loving husband had a good day," Catalina said kindly. I smiled and nodded. "Oh, sweetheart, you are always so thoughtful," she whispered, gently resting her hand on mine. We went to sleep, and I felt so peaceful. But morning came quickly at 5 o'clock when our alarm went off. It was time to get Alandra up for our 3-hour drive to Asheville. Catalina took a lot of pictures that day. She snapped shots of me with Alandra, Alandra with her sister, Amber with David, and many more. I was happy to see Amber and Catalina getting along, chatting about Amber's wedding plans. David took good care of Alandra, always going with her when she wanted to show him something. I stayed on guard, keeping an eye out. In today's world, you can't be too careful. We had lunch at the zoo, explored a bit more, and then we all got tired. I ended up carrying Alandra on my shoulders. I didn't mind, but I knew she wouldn't need me like this for long. That's part of growing up. On the way back, I saw Alandra napping in Amber's lap. Amber gave me a sweet smile in the rearview mirror. "Honey, can we order food tonight?" Catalina asked, sounding exhausted. "Sure, how about pizza?" I replied, glancing at Amber and David. "That's fine," David said. "Is a supreme pizza okay with everyone?" I asked, knowing Alandra loved it. Catalina liked it too, even though I didn't, but I usually gave in. "David is allergic to olives," Amber noted, placing her hand on his chest. "Then let's get a small supreme for them and a small meat lovers for us," I suggested with a smile. "Sounds good," David agreed, and Catalina rolled her eyes playfully. "You handle the pizzas. I'll get Alandra ready for tomorrow," Catalina said, smiling brightly as she took Alandra to her room. "Dad, you know Amber started. "What would happen if we didn't go to the beach tomorrow?" I asked after ordering the pizzas. "Alandra would be upset." "I just don't want you guys to go through too much trouble for us," Amber said. "It's no trouble, Amber. I promised to take you there a long time ago, and I keep my promises," I replied warmly, remembering that promise I made to her when she was 10. "So, Nathan, what time are we leaving?" David asked. 7 in the morning. "It's a 6-hour drive to Roberto's place at Canadian Hole. Yes, that's the beach's name," I said, smiling at their disbelief. "We'll stay until Thursday so you can enjoy it. It's a lovely place." "Honey, what time is it?" Catalina called from Alandra's room. 7:20, I replied. "Is something up?" Amber asked. "A soccer game is on soon," I explained. David looked puzzled, but I clarified. "Soccer." "I didn't know you liked soccer," Amber said, snuggling against David on the love seat. I got into it because Catalina and Alandra love the games. Her family are big fans and they have big parties for the World Cup. In return, they also come together for the Super Bowl for me. That's what family does. We compromise. All right, we're getting ready, Catalina said, walking in with Alandra, now talking on her phone in Spanish. Alandra ran into the living room, climbing onto the sofa to wait for the game to start. I turned on the TV and switched it to ESPN3 for the game between Mexico and Brazil. There was a knock on the door, signaling our pizzas had arrived. I patted Catalina's leg and went to get them. She was glued to the screen as Mexico led in the first half. We both found each other's favorite sports boring. She didn't like football, and I didn't enjoy soccer. But we put that aside for each other. I paid the delivery boy and gave him a good tip, taking the pizzas inside. "Pizza's here!" I called out as I set them on the kitchen counter and grabbed enough plates. Amber and David wandered in, but Alandra and Catalina stayed put. Alandra wanted to be just like her mom. "Make yourselves a plate," I said, serving them. "Thanks, hun. Can you get me a beer?" Catalina asked, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Sure thing. Kool-Aid for you," I teased my daughter. "Aren't they going to eat with us?" Amber asked quietly after I sat down. "Nope, not with Mexico ahead. They're glued to that spot," I said, biting into my slice. I had missed Meat Lover's pizza. "This is so good," David said, devouring his slice. "Best pizza in town," I replied, savoring the flavors, knowing I wouldn't have it again for a while. "Sí, patea la pelota," Catalina yelled as she jumped up with her plate in one hand and her beer in the other. Alandra copied her. "No, pendejo, ¿cómo puedes dejar que te quiten la pelota?" she complained as Brazil took the ball from Mexico. "Alandra, language," I scolded, giving my wife a look. Catalina looked away, embarrassed. We finished our pizza, had a couple of beers, and I put Alandra to bed at her usual time. David got into the game by the end of it. We said our goodnights and went to our rooms. Catalina was up at 5:30 the next morning making breakfast. She was excited. I hugged and kissed her neck as she flipped pancakes. We enjoyed the quiet moment together. "Nat!" Catalina gasped as I playfully pinched her, heading to get the kids up. "What? You didn't think I'd keep my hands to myself with my beautiful wife here?" I joked, seeing her blush. "You better not," she whispered shyly, making me smile. "Wake up, Munchkin. Pancakes are almost ready," I said, waking Alandra. "We don't want to miss the beach, do we?" I whispered as she rolled over. She woke up quickly. I knocked on the guest room door. "We're up. Give us a minute to get dressed," David's voice came through. "Okay, breakfast will be ready soon," I said, closing the door. "Thanks, Dad," Amber said as I handed her and David their coffee. "Honey, get the orange juice," Catalina directed, finishing the pancakes. I set the juice and Alandra's chocolate milk on the table. I helped set the table and carry the food. I smiled as Amber helped Catalina and David pitched in. "Don't just stand there, Dad. Get the plates," Amber teased, carrying the pancakes while David brought the sausage. I saw Catalina's happy smile as she got the syrup. They all felt like family, and I wondered about my children's past with their mom, something I needed to understand better. We left the condo by 6:45, ready for the beach. "Mama!" I turned, surprised to hear Amber call Catalina that. Catalina's eyes lit up with happiness. "Of course," Catalina said, offering her arm to Amber. "You boys don't mind unloading, do you?" "We'll handle it," I said, looking at David, who nodded. "Come, Alandra, let's show your sister the ocean," Catalina said warmly, with Alandra's cheerful, "Okay," filling the air. "Did something happen between Amber and her mom?" I asked David as we unloaded the bags. "I think Amber should tell you herself," he said, looking down. "Did that woman hurt my little girl?" I asked firmly. "Emotional, not physical, or at least that's what Amber says." "Not when I'm around," David replied quietly. "She knows I won't tolerate that under my roof. Kicked her out a few times when I caught her." "I think you'll do," I said, letting go of his arm. "I won't tell Amber a thing." With that, I showed him where he and Amber could stay on the other side of the house. This way, they could have some privacy. After we put their bags in the right rooms, we went outside to join the girls. "I told you I'd bring you here someday, didn't I?" I said from behind them. Catalina and Amber stood looking at the white-capped waves, while Alandra ran along the beach picking up shells like usual. I wasn't expecting my daughter to hug me tightly as she did.
"Thank you. It's so beautiful,"
she whispered close to my ear. I held her and gently rubbed her back. "You and I need to talk later, just us," I whispered in her ear. She nodded against my shoulder before slipping out of my arms and into David's. "Ever been to the beach?" I asked the man with my daughter. "No. This is my first time. My family was poor, not that they didn't work hard, just not much money." "So, something like this was always a dream," David said, though his eyes were on the vast blue sea. "I understand. When Amber was little, money was tight. I worked my way up while going to night school to give my family a better life," I said, feeling Catalina take my hand as she came to my side. Then, Amber took my other hand like she did when she was a child. Later that night, after Alandra went to bed and Catalina kept David company, I took Amber out to the back deck of Roberto's beach house. I knew I would hate what I was about to hear. What parent wants to hear that their child was hurt? But I had to hear it. I had to know what she had done to my kids. "Okay, Amber, I know I told your brother I didn't want to hear about what happened after I left. But I think I need to know," I said, as the sound of waves filled the air. "You sure?" she asked, her eyes dropping. "It wasn't like my daughter." I placed my hand on her arm and she looked back at me. "Very sure." Amber must have seen how serious I was. By the end of her story, I was furious. But I couldn't do anything right then, so I just hugged my daughter as she cried into my chest. She couldn't take responsibility for her actions that ruined our marriage, so she blamed our kids. She even tried to get her to entertain one of her male friends when she was with that man. I wondered why my parents never told me. Maybe they didn't know. My father would have gone crazy, and my mother would probably have chased her with a rolling pin. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry," I whispered into her hair. "I'm sorry about everything." "No, Dad, you were hurt. You had every right to think we didn't want you. I don't blame you. You're here now. That's what matters. I knew one thing. My kids wouldn't have to deal with that woman again, not if I had anything to say about it." "Is everything, Al?" Catalina stopped as Amber hugged her suddenly. She looked at me, feeling the same trembling I felt. Catalina knew something had happened with their mother for Amber to act this way. "Shh, it's going to be all right," Catalina comforted Amber in a motherly voice. "Come, let's get you cleaned up and something to calm your nerves," she said, leading Amber into the house and giving me a look that said she wanted to know everything. I was beating an old piece of wood against a post to vent my anger. I couldn't put my hands around her neck, so this would have to do. "I take it Amber told you." David's voice cut through as my chest heaved from the effort. "Yeah," I said, tossing the plank into the sand. "I want you to know I would never treat Amber like that," David said, walking down the steps to the beach. "You better not. My wife wouldn't like visiting me in prison," I joked. "Understood," David said with a smile. "She isn't helping to pay for the wedding, is she?" I asked as David stood next to me. "No, she thinks us getting married is a mistake. She wants Amber to stay single so she can use her to attract men." I was starting to like this man as he spat in anger. "Good. If you need help, contact us, and we'll help in any way we can," I said firmly. "You really mean that?" David asked, looking puzzled. "I do," I nodded. "I know what a wedding costs, having been through two myself. I know venues aren't cheap, and starting out in life can be hard. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. We'll set something up," I said in a fatherly tone as I held my hand out to him. "I will. You have my word, Nathan," David said, shaking my hand firmly. "Did your father teach you that handshake?" I asked, seeing him nod. "Good. A father should teach that to his son," I said. "What are you two doing out here?" Catalina asked from the top of the steps. "Oh, just guy stuff," I replied with a smile. I could almost see her rolling her eyes. "It's getting late. You both should come inside," Catalina said. From the way she stood, I knew she wanted to talk. I said goodnight to David as he went up the steps. He told Catalina the same as he passed her. Catalina knew me well enough to understand that while I didn't show it, I was really mad at my ex-wife. "Shh, Amor. This anger isn't good for you. She's not under her mother's control anymore," Catalina said softly as she touched my chest. "She told you?" I asked, and Catalina just nodded. "I can't blame you for leaving that woman, but I do wish you had brought the kids with you." "Then I could be a mother of 3, Catalina joked. 3? Not 4? I teased, wiggling my eyebrows. Do you think you can handle having another baby? Catalina challenged. Oh, you bet I can, I said firmly. Then I guess I'll stop taking my pills, Catalina smiled playfully. The next 3 days were full of fun. We took Amber and David all over the island. We ate good seafood and met nice people. One time, a rude person around Amber's age came up to us. She had colorful hair and face piercings. She started calling me racist and said I was stealing Latinx culture. I didn't take her seriously. In my job, you need to be professional. And she didn't look the part. Before I knew it, Catalina had punched her, and the girl was on the ground looking up confused as Catalina cursed in Spanish. I learned a lot of new bad words that day. Thankfully, David covered Alandra's ears. Maybe next time you shouldn't yell at people you don't know, then you wouldn't end up on the ground, unable to understand what my wife said to you. I suggest a new hair color and a better outlook on life if you want to get anywhere, I said before leading my family away. I wondered what the world would be like if there were more people like her. I hoped I wouldn't be around to see it. Even that couldn't ruin our fun. Soon it was time to leave. We washed the sheets and put them back in the closet. Roberto never wanted sheets on the beds if the house was going to sit empty for a while. The family wouldn't come back until 2 weeks before school started, so it would be a while before the house was used again. Amber and David helped clean the house before we locked up and left, knowing we wouldn't be back in Charlotte until late that night. Thanks, Dad. The beach was perfect, Amber said happily as she hugged me when we got to my condo. You're welcome, honey, I said, rubbing her back. It might have taken a while, but I keep my word. I'm going to put Alandra to bed, Catalina whispered, kissing my cheek and carrying our sleepy daughter to her room. Soon, Amber and David went to bed too. I was getting ready to sleep as I carried our bags into our bedroom. When Catalina slid into bed next to me, everything felt right as I turned off the light. Our monthly family get-together was fun. Amber and David were welcomed warmly. Catalina's parents took a special interest in Amber. It wasn't surprising. After all, Amber was their step-grandchild. I listened for any comments about the kids. Catalina did the same. She even scolded one of the teens who said rude things about my daughter. If I had heard it, the response wouldn't have been just words. The boy was 18 and knew he could face more than just a scolding from me. Also, I had to stop David from burning his tongue when he almost ate chili with ghost peppers. David liked spicy food, but that was too much. Everyone laughed good-naturedly and gave him a bowl with less heat. All good things must end, and soon it was time to say goodbye. I hadn't talked to my son Carson all week because he was doing some secret training with the Army. At the airport, Amber clung to Catalina, her stepmother. Catalina had been her only real mother figure, apart from her grandmother's, for 7 years. I watched as Alandra held back tears while my children hugged each other. You two have a safe flight. Call us as soon as you land, I said, pulling David into a one-arm hug. He seemed surprised. What can I say? The man grew on me. We will, David said, with Amber nodding along. Don't forget what I told you. If you need help with the wedding, just give me a call, I stated, with Catalina nodding along. Does that mean you'll walk me down the aisle? Amber asked, with hopeful eyes. Most definitely. I wouldn't miss it, I said, smiling like a proud father. My daughter hugged me tight. And you can call any time you need to talk. I'm always here to listen, Catalina said gently. I will. Thank you, Amber whispered, hugging Catalina again. Don't thank me. I'm your stepmother. I want you to feel comfortable talking to me about anything. Alandra will want to talk to her big sister too, Catalina said, holding Amber like she did with Alandra when she was upset. I picked up Alandra so she could wave goodbye to her sister over the crowd. I fought back tears as I watched my daughter disappear in the crowd, but now we were talking again, making up for lost time I wasted in sadness. I knew there would be more times like this, and nothing would stop me from seeing my daughter. Months passed, and my bond with my kids grew strong. Amber and I talked almost every day. David even called for advice on banking and other stuff, which I was happy to help with. Carson called as much as he could when he wasn't on duty or training. They talked to Catalina a lot, which made her very happy. Wedding planning was stressing Amber out, and Catalina often had to calm her down. When summer ended, Alandra started kindergarten. I was both proud and sad, knowing my little girl was growing up so fast. Catalina stayed on her birth control, saying she didn't want to be pregnant when we flew out for the wedding. By then, she and Amber had formed a close bond, something Amber didn't have with her mother. If I was honest, it was a blessing, even though it bothered her biological mom. As Thanksgiving approached, I knew Carson couldn't make it to Kansas City, which made me sad. But he promised to come to Charlotte for Christmas and wanted to save enough leave time for Amber's wedding before he left the service that summer. I felt relieved. It's not that I didn't respect the military, but knowing Carson was out training often made me worry about his safety at night. I think many parents in the service feel the same when their kids join. "Hey, Mom," I said into my phone as we walked through the airport to catch our flight to Kansas City to join my parents, David and Amber, for Thanksgiving. "No, we haven't boarded yet. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Just wanted to let you know we're at the airport." I handed Alandra my phone when she wanted to talk to her grandmother. They visit us often, and I cover their travel expenses, but they don't travel much because of their age. As we waited for our flight, I noticed Alandra texting Amber a lot. She was telling Amber everything she thought was important with her vast 5-year-old experience. Amber played along. Then I heard the ding of a text from Carson. It seemed my daughter was happily chatting with both of them. I got up and took my phone from Alandra as we were ready to board our flight. "Mom! Dad!" Amber called out to us, with David next to her when we landed. Catalina's cheeks got rosy. She and Amber hugged for a long time. I never interrupted them. Catalina's face showed Amber needed a woman to talk to who wouldn't try to manipulate her. I knew Alandra loved the praise from David. After all, he was going to be her brother-in-law soon. "David," I greeted him, shaking his hand. Then he pulled me into a one-arm hug. "Are these all your bags?" he asked, and I nodded. "This way," Amber said, holding Alandra's hand. Alandra was happy to see her big sister again. "Wait, isn't that Mom's car?" I asked, seeing the Buick. "Yes, they've been letting us use it since ours has been having problems," Amber said, looking embarrassed. "What's wrong with it?" I asked in a serious tone. "Other than being older than I am, the engine gave out a few days ago," David said sadly. I looked at Catalina, who already knew what I was thinking. She nodded, giving me approval to spend money on a new car, which we could afford. I didn't want them driving an unreliable car. What father wants his daughter stuck in a bad part of town with a broken-down car? As we drove to my parents' house, I noticed a Volvo dealership and knew where I'd be going the next morning. Thanksgiving was still 3 days away. I looked up the dealership on my phone to see what cars they had. I listened to everyone talk and knew what car I would get for them. It was a 2018 Volvo S60 with just over 15,000 miles on it. It wasn't brand new, but close enough. I knew they wouldn't have car problems anytime soon. My parents waited outside their house as Amber pulled in with my mom's car. Alandra squealed in joy and ran to her grandparents, who were just as happy to see her. Meanwhile, Catalina and I chatted behind the open trunk, away from the kids' view. She looked over the car's features before giving me back my phone. "See, you do care," Catalina teased as she handed my phone back. "Go make the call, I'll deal with the bags." I noticed the curious looks from my parents and waved before walking down the street to make the call. I dialed the dealership number, remembering how my old neighborhood had changed as the line rang. "Hello, this is Mrs. Huffman. How can I help you?" "Hi, can you hold the 2018 Volvo S60 with 15,000 miles on it until tomorrow?" I asked. "Why not today? We don't close till 9. "You're open till 9? I didn't know that," I said, checking my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. "Can you have it ready for a test drive in 30 minutes? "I certainly can. May I have your name?" "Nathan Hal." "I'll see you in half an hour, Mr. Hal." We hung up, and I hurried back to my parents' house. They were still outside, chatting and waiting. "Amber, toss me the keys," I called. She didn't hesitate and threw them to me. "David, you're coming with me. Mom, Dad, we'll be back soon," I said, seeing the confusion on their faces. Catalina just smiled and nodded. "Where are we going?" "We just got here," David asked as I started backing out of the driveway. "It's a surprise," I said, smiling, and headed to the dealership. "Nathan?" David was surprised as we pulled in. "You and Amber need a reliable car," I said, turning off the engine. "And what's more reliable than a Volvo?" "But you. Think of it as an early Christmas gift from Catalina and me. This way you have a car while deciding what to do with your old one." Mrs. Huffman was waiting beside the car, ready to help.
Good afternoon. Which one of you is Mr. Hal?
She asked politely. I am, but this car is for my future son-in-law and daughter. He'll be doing the test drive, I said, placing a hand on David's shoulder. I wish my in-laws were as nice as yours, Mrs. Huffman said, smiling at David. Shall we take a drive, Mr. Callister? David was amazed by all the features in the car as he started it up. I sat in the back seat, noticing it was quite roomy. Mrs. Huffman explained everything about the car as we drove around. I could tell David liked it when he handed back the keys after the test drive. Please follow me to start the paperwork, Mrs. Huffman said. After checking with David, I confirmed Amber would love the car. Now, how will you be paying for this? She asked once we were in her office. In full, I said, handing her my debit card. David looked stunned. Nathan, that's... I told you, early Christmas present, I said with a smile. I missed buying my daughter her first car, and I had time to make up for... Wow, my in-laws never bought us a car, Mrs. Huffman teased, noticing David's red face. Let me process this and get the car ready for you, she said, standing up. David's phone started buzzing. If it's Amber, don't tell her anything. I want it to be a surprise, I said. He nodded. Oh, she'll be surprised. Hopefully she doesn't freak out, David said, typing on his phone. I just told her we were having a father-son talk. He put his phone away. You don't know how much this will mean to her. She's been so stressed about the wedding and bills. This will really help. Again, I nodded. Weddings can be stressful. Then David's phone rang with a strange tone, and he quickly declined the call. Is there something you want to tell me before you marry my daughter? I asked protectively. Yeah, your ex-wife is a pain, David said bluntly. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. She is, I agreed. Is that who called? I asked, and he nodded. Yeah, only ringtone I could find with the word pain in it, David said, laughing with me. It's fitting. I wish I had thought of it, I said. It would have been fun during our settlement. I can imagine, David nodded. Mr. Hal, here is your card and the receipt, Mrs. Huffman said, handing them back to me. Mr. Callister, please sign where you see the red tabs, Mrs. Huffman said. I thought this might be the quickest car sale she ever had. I folded the invoice and put it in my pocket. We might not go on that trip to Spain, but the money was used for a good reason. I was sure my wife, Catalina, wouldn't be too upset since she agreed to it before. Mr. Callister, you'll get the car title in a few months and the license plate within a week, Mrs. Huffman said, standing up. She shook my hand and David's, handed him the keys and temp plate, and thanked us for choosing Crown Volvo. She led us out of the dealership. What will I tell Amber? David asked, running his hand through his hair as we waited for the car detailing to be done. I grinned, thinking of a plan. Here's what we'll do, I said, and whispered it to David. At 6:20, I pulled into my parents' driveway. David waited 2 houses down for my signal. I saw movement in the living room window as I walked to the front door. Dad, where's David and where have you two been? Amber asked angrily from the porch, with my smiling wife behind her. Yeah, Poppy, you can't just leave like that, my youngest daughter, Alandra, said, copying Amber's stance. It was cute. Oh, just some errands, I said as my parents joined us. I handed my mom her keys and hugged her and my dad. Dad? Amber's tone made me smile. Patience, little mouse, I said, using her childhood nickname. I texted David that it was time. Amber didn't notice the blue 4-door Volvo pulling up until David got out. David, what did you do? Amber asked, looking at the car. You should ask what I did, I said. I hope you like the car, honey. Amber's anger turned to shock and then to happiness. You bought us a car? Amber stuttered. Well, Catalina and I did, I said, and she hugged me tight. Thank you so much, Amber said, hugging me. You're welcome, honey, I replied. Don't worry, that's what family does, I said, noticing my parents giving me a look. They probably thought I'd never live this down. I chuckled at Amber jumping off the porch and running to David. He spun her around, and I could see she was relieved about not having a huge repair bill for their old car. I'd junk it if the engine died since it would cost more to fix than it's worth. I pulled Catalina close. Amber called out that she'd take a quick drive. I nodded, watching her rush to the driver's seat. David shook his head but got in when Amber insisted. Amber returned in less than 5 minutes. She was so happy, dancing in the seat before jumping out and running toward us. "I so love you too," Amber said, hugging Catalina and me. "Amber, you're very welcome," Catalina said. "We're happy to help. We know you've been stressed lately." Amber's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. I wondered what they talked about on their calls, but I wouldn't pry. "But you didn't need to buy such a fancy car?" "Fancy? That's a standard model," I joked. "You just have to pay the taxes and maintenance." She hugged me tightly, and I held her, knowing she needed it. "Okay, everyone wash up. Dinner is almost ready," my mom said. Alandra took her hand, and they went inside. "I must look like a mess," Amber chuckled, wiping her eyes as David joined her. "Nonsense, you're as beautiful as ever," David said, charming her. Catalina and I left them to talk and went inside. We were halfway through dinner when Amber's phone rang in the living room. She tried to ignore it, but it kept ringing. She excused herself and went to answer it. I tried not to listen, but when I heard her say, "Mom," I couldn't help it. "No, I told you David and I are spending Thanksgiving with his parents, and we'll see you on Christmas. I don't care if that doesn't suit you. Take it or leave it because we aren't changing our plans." "I haven't talked to him since you scared him off, remember?" I looked down when Catalina put her hand on my arm. She shook her head when she saw I was about to stand up to face my ex-wife. "Why do you care anyway? Is the new guy you're seeing not meeting your expectations?" I lifted an eyebrow when I noticed the twinkle in Catalina's eye at my daughter's tone. "Hey, I wasn't the one calling repeatedly during dinner and interrupting my meal with Dad and Grandma." I heard my daughter's frustrated "ugh" from the living room. I could understand it. My eyebrow went up again when I saw the proud smile on her lips. "Sorry you had to hear that," Amber said, looking embarrassed as she came back into the dining room. "Honey," I said, putting my hand over hers as she sat down. "Has she been giving you trouble?" I asked, worried. "A little bit. She thinks you're back in town." "I don't know who told her, but it wasn't me," Amber said, her eyes pleading with me to believe her. "I don't care if she knows I'm here or not. What matters is how she treats you. Do you want me to talk to her?" "No," Amber shook her head. "I can handle Mom," she said, glancing at Catalina. "I don't want this week ruined because of her." "Okay, but if she becomes too much, let me know and I'll fix it fast," I said, patting my daughter's hand. "Thanks, Dad," Amber said, her cheeks turning red as we finished our meal. When it was time for Alandra's bedtime, David and Amber hugged her tightly before I took her to my old bedroom where she usually slept. It had only a small bed. Catalina and I would use the fold-out bed in the study, which used to be my cousin's room. My cousin's parents had lost custody of him to my parents until he turned 18. He still talked to my folks daily. I don't know if he speaks with his own. I can't blame him. His dad went to jail for something bad. Amber and David left around 10 that night as both had work in the morning. They promised to come over as soon as they were off their shifts. The week went by with no sign of the ex. I was thankful for that. I don't know who would have confronted her first, my wife or me. It would have been a funny sight. But Thanksgiving arrived, and my mom, David's mom, and Catalina sent me to the living room. David chatted with my dad and his dad as the football pregame show played. Amber and Alandra played an old board game by the fireplace. I saw 3 generations together under one roof. It was heartwarming. Alandra came over and took my hand. "Come play, Poppy," Alandra said sweetly. I have to admit I was nervous about going back home. Not because of my daughter, but because I didn't want to hear my parents say, "I told you so," for being stubborn. But it's good to be proven wrong sometimes. David's parents were nice people, although I didn't like how David's dad looked at my daughter when she called me Poppy. Still, I wasn't going to make an issue of it at the dinner table. Not on Thanksgiving. My mom would kill me if I ruined Thanksgiving, but I made a note to keep my daughter away from him in the future. Catalina noticed the look too, but she hid her glances well. After dinner, I took Amber to my old bedroom and asked her about David's dad, while Catalina stayed close to Alandra. Okay, I was wrong about the man. It wasn't because he was bad, it was because Alandra looked like their daughter who had died at her age. I fell onto my old bed and buried my face in my hands. I couldn't imagine losing one of my daughters and seeing another child who looked like her. It must be hard for him. Other than that, the holiday wasn't so bad. Catalina and David's mom got along well after I shared what Amber had told me. David's dad was very attentive to Alandra whenever she asked him something. I even saw him playing cards with her. I knew he was letting her win on purpose, so I left them be and went out back to help bring in firewood for my dad. "Need some help?" David said behind me. "An extra hand would be good," I chuckled. "Load me up, Doc." "Is that enough?" "Should be," I nodded. "So you didn't tell us you had a sister?" "Yeah, we don't talk about her much," David said, looking down. "Mom and Dad almost divorced after she passed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up bad memories." "It's okay. I know my dad's behavior worried you. He doesn't mean anything by it," David said, trying to reassure me. "I get it. I'd be a mess if that happened to one of my girls. It couldn't have been easy for them," I said. I don't know how I managed it with a load of wood in my arms, but I patted David on the back. "Alandra, what are you doing, silly?" I teased as she talked with David's parents, who listened to every word. Smiling at David, I nodded in thanks as he helped me with the wood, stacking it for my father's fire. "Talking," Alandra giggled. "Oh, you are you?" I said. I almost dropped the last pieces of wood on my foot when a spider crawled out, but David quickly caught it on a stick and threw it into the fire. "My hero," I joked, making David's parents laugh. I sat on the couch, called my daughter over, and put her on my lap. "What are you three talking about?" "Everything," she exclaimed. "Everything? You don't say," I said, smiling. David's mom, Meredith, seemed taken with Alandra. I knew she was thinking of her lost daughter. Alandra nodded. "You have a lovely daughter," Meredith said, looking at us. "I can't take all the credit. My wife deserves that," I said, sensing my wife nearby. "But I do love this munchkin," I said, tickling Alandra, who laughed loudly. "Can we take a picture of you two?" David's father asked, holding his cell phone. "We don't mind," I said, checking with Alandra, who shook her head. I watched as Meredith leaned on her husband, looking at our picture. Alandra went over to them to see the photo. They looked at me before picking her up, and I nodded. Meredith and her husband cuddled with Alandra as they chatted. "Can I get you two something to drink?" I asked, getting up as my dad snored loudly from his nap. "I'll be right back." "So, what do you think of them, Dad?" Amber asked as I entered the kitchen where she, my mom, and Catalina were chatting. "They seem nice, but they'll be your in-laws, not mine," I said, patting Amber's shoulder as I went to make drinks for Meredith and George, David's father. "Yeah, but you're coming to the wedding, and I want you all to get along." I felt Amber's eyes on me as I filled glasses with ice. Other than that mix-up, I don't see a problem. But then everything felt cold as I heard a familiar voice from the past knocking at the door. I turned, ready to deal with her, but Amber stood up. "I'll handle it, Dad. If Mom knows you're here, she won't leave," Amber said, heading for the door. "What have you been teaching my daughter?" I asked, looking at Catalina, who smirked. I noticed my mom smiling into her glass. "This and that," Catalina said vaguely. "Really?" She said, sitting primly. "You don't have to worry about that woman anymore. Amber can handle herself," Catalina said, sipping her drink. "Please tell me you didn't teach her to be as feisty as you," I said with a playful sigh, pinching my nose. "That's not nice, Nat," Catalina pouted before realizing I was joking. "I thought you would be happy." "I am. I'm glad you helped her find her confidence. At least I know she has strong women to look up to," I said, making Catalina blush. "Well, she's my daughter now, and women in this family are strong," Catalina said, regaining her confidence. "Don't I know it?" I muttered as I took the drinks to George and Meredith. "What was that?" Catalina called after me. "Nothing, honey," I replied. "Better be nothing." I knew she was joking. "Poppy, who is that woman? She doesn't seem happy," Alandra asked, peeking through the curtain. "She's nobody you need to worry about. And what have I told you about spying on other people's conversations?" I said in a firm voice while handing out the drinks. "But David is watching. Why can't I?" Alandra pouted. "David is checking to make sure Amber is okay," I explained, seeing David nod. "Is she a bad person?" Alandra asked, not knowing the woman was my ex-wife. "I think she is," I said, noticing David's parents staying silent. "What did she do?" Alandra asked with a 5-year-old's curiosity. Drop it, Alandra, I said. She must have seen the look in my eyes because she didn't ask again. She makes me so mad sometimes, Amber hissed as she came back inside and hugged David. Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to curse in front of Alandra. Sorry, Papa George, Meredith, that you had to see that, she said, glancing around the room. Amber, are you okay? I asked, knowing her mother was a sensitive topic. I will be, Amber sighed, holding David tight. Young man, are you taking liberties with my daughter? I joked as they kissed. David's parents tried not to laugh. I am, David said, smiling. Good. Dad? Amber exclaimed. What? It's 2021, no sense in being old-fashioned. Enjoy life, I said, succeeding in embarrassing her. Isn't that what parents do when their kids are in love? Though I wonder if his thoughts are good enough for my girl, I said, tapping my chin and looking at my daughter's face turn many shades of red as I continued teasing her. I assure you, Nathan, they are not. I laughed when Amber playfully hit his chest, telling him not to join in my nonsense. Dinner was a blast as we all gathered around the table to eat the leftovers from lunch. We swapped stories and laughed a lot. Alandra told everyone about our trip to the beach and the zoo, while Catalina mentioned that we were thinking of a trip to Spain next year after the wedding. Amber didn't seem surprised. She and Catalina had grown very close over the months. We said our goodbyes to David's parents, then to Amber and David, promising to spend time together that Friday before we flew back to Charlotte on Saturday. When it was time to leave, there were many hugs because we wouldn't see each other till March, unless they visited us for Christmas. I hoped they would, but Amber wouldn't want to deal with my ex-wife. Personally, I say she could stay away, but I didn't want to make it harder for Amber, who still had to live in that town. The next 21 days were tough. I was anxious to see my son. Carson planned to fly in on the 19th and leave on the 26th, saving the rest of his leave for Amber's wedding. I didn't mind. 6 days with him was more than I had in 7 years due to my own stubbornness. Catalina got a bit annoyed with me, but she didn't say anything, knowing I was very nervous as we waited for Carson's plane to arrive. Carson! 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 Alandra shouted happily when she saw her half-brother, bouncing and waving her hand wildly as we waited for him to come through the crowd. Go on, amor, Catalina whispered, giving me her loving smile and nudging my arm. Carson dropped his bag to the ground and hurried towards us. We hugged tightly. Look at you, I said, proud, holding my son's face in my hands. You've grown so much. I tried not to cry, but it was hard because this was my boy. Come on, Dad, don't embarrass me in front of Mom. Even though my son was a grown man now, I could still see the little boy I raised. Though I wondered when my kids started calling Catalina their mother. It didn't bother me, but it was something I probably wouldn't find out. I hope your flight was smooth, Carson, Catalina said, joining my side and hugging my son too. It was. Thank you for everything. I raised an eyebrow when I heard my son whisper that to Catalina. I wondered what he meant. It's what family is for, Catalina said, rubbing his back. I'll always be here for you two, so don't hesitate to call. My son hugged her tighter. Alandra tugged on his pants, wanting her hug too, with her arms outstretched. Hello, little sis, Carson greeted, squatting down and hugging his sister tightly. She patted his right bicep when he flexed his muscle for her. I still thought I could beat my son. I might be old, but not that old. Carson, what are your plans when you leave the Army? I asked as we walked back to my car. Thinking of becoming an engineer, he said in a confident tone. Oh, is that what you do in the Army? I asked, looking at him. No, I'm just a regular soldier, Carson said, shaking his head. Are you looking at schools? I have a few in mind. I saw him nod. Maybe we can help you decide, Catalina said gently, and I nodded. I have one in mind, but I'm not sure if you'll like it. My son gave me a sly look. Oh, and which one is that? I asked as I opened the trunk of my car. Duke. I stopped in my tracks when I heard that. What did you say? I tried to keep my voice steady. I know it's not close, but it's nearer than California, and I thought you might be all right with me coming here. I heard my son sigh as I hugged him. Of course, you can come home anytime you want, I said, my voice shaking. Just remember, you might gain some weight with Catalina's cooking. Catalina playfully slapped my arm, but I knew from her smile she was happy too. You sure? I don't want to. Carson, you're always welcome in our home. It's your home and Amber's, too, Catalina said warmly, lightly touching my son's arm. Yay! My brother is coming home, Alandra squealed, doing a little dance. I'm so glad you two said that. I raised an eyebrow at the relief in his voice. I already got accepted for the fall semester next year. I laughed, putting my arm around his shoulders and pulling Carson close. Seeing his blushing face filled me with pride. Well then, let's get you home. Amber and David will be mad they lost the guest bedroom, I chuckled, putting Carson's bag in the trunk. Here, I said, handing a beer to my son as he leaned on the railing of my balcony, looking out at the city. You're old enough, don't give me that look, I said when my son glanced at me and the beer in my hand. Just never thought I'd share a drink with you, Carson replied, taking the bottle from me. I didn't either, I admitted. Glad I was wrong. Catalina seems to care a lot about you, Carson said casually. As do I. I waved at her as she moved around the condo, while Alandra colored in her book at the coffee table. Dad, about that day? Carson paused as I placed a hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Amber told me. Your mother shouldn't have put you two through that. That's not what a parent should do. I never thought she would involve you two to try to make me a fool. Let's leave the past behind and focus on now, okay? I can do that, Carson agreed, smiling and tapping his beer bottle against mine. So, Dad, are you two having more kids? I almost spit out my beer at that. Don't you start, I said, shaking my finger at him. He just smiled wider. Have you been talking to Catalina? He nodded. We're thinking about it after your sister's wedding, but by the time Alandra is in high school, I'll be in my 60s. So, does that really matter? He had a point. And you're okay with having another brother or sister? I asked, leaning on the railing. Yeah, our family might have had its issues, but you were always a good dad. Can't say the same about Mom. I patted Carson's back as he sighed. What your mother did is on her, not you. Don't worry about it, I said, finishing my beer. Come on, lunch should be ready, I said, taking his empty bottle. What are we having? Carnitas, you'll love them, I promise, I said with a smile, leading him inside. Oh, these are good. Carson groaned in delight after taking his first bite of carnitas. What's in this? He looked at Catalina like a kid, asking. Pork, mostly pork with a little seasoning, Catalina answered with a smile. Please, if you're still hungry, there's more, but get it before your dad does. I shot her a look while she winked at Carson, who sat next to Alandra. She blew me a kiss, happy to see my grown-up kids enjoying her cooking. I watched as Alandra showed Carson how to fold his carnita so nothing fell out when he took a bite. Alandra smiled wide as Carson asked if he did it right. It warmed my heart to see my children getting along despite their age gap. I knew Alandra sometimes felt lonely as the only child at home. It was good to know she could talk to her siblings now. Son, I warned when he reached for the hot sauce. Relax, I can handle it. Mom got me hooked. Carson smiled at Catalina, whose face turned red. What have you done to my son? I joked. Opened his taste buds, don't blame him because he likes good food, Catalina replied, turning her nose up playfully. I think we need to talk about this later in private, I said with a sly grin. Oh? Really? Catalina replied, raising an eyebrow. Oh yes, a nice chat is needed, I said quietly so Alandra wouldn't hear. Noting how Catalina's cheeks turned pink, her breath quickened, and a spark lit in her eyes. I look forward to it, Catalina said in a teasing tone before eating some rice. Carson smiled, watching us before returning to his meal. When Christmas came, Alandra was at my bedside way too early, excited to open presents. It's like kids have a network to wake parents up while they're still half asleep. Thanks, Mom. Carson yawned as he took his coffee from Catalina. What can I say? Catalina fit the role well, and I wasn't going to stop my kids from calling her Mom. After what Amber told me, I knew they needed someone who treated them right. After breakfast, we all gathered in the living room. Alandra rushed around handing out presents, setting hers aside. I got Carson a pricey watch with 2 time zones, yet the gift I gave Catalina, besides the pearl earrings and necklace, was a set of keys she found in a velvet box. Nat? Catalina gave me a look, waiting for an explanation. Well, you always wanted a big family. You never said it, but a husband knows, I began, seeing her eyes widen. And this condo isn't big enough for our family and the future ones to come, I said, placing my hand on her stomach. I know I stressed this month a lot about Carson coming, but that was to keep you from catching on to my plan. You have a way of figuring things out. I smiled. As her mind worked to understand my words, Catalina suddenly jumped up from her seat. You bought us a house, she shouted, excitement clear in her voice. I did, I said with a smile. The bank had some foreclosed houses, so I looked through them. I found one that's big enough for us. The bank and I made a deal where they take the payment from my checks, so we don't need a mortgage. We can move in after the first of the month. I watched her emotions shift before she squealed with joy and jumped into my arms. You're going to love the place, Mom, Carson said with a grin. You knew, I said, seeing Carson look a bit shy. I did, he admitted. Dad took me to see it on Monday to make sure I'd like staying there on weekends. His voice was small when he said that. My hand moved along Catalina's back as she stood up and went over to Carson. I noticed a familiar look in his eyes, reminding me of when he was young. She took his face in her hands. Did you like it? Good, Catalina said softly after Carson nodded, then hugged him. We want you to come home whenever you want, Carson. Our home will always have a place for you and Amber. Don't forget that. She glanced at me with those brown eyes that said it all. Now show me this house you bought us. Where are we going? Catalina asked as I started the car. Belmont, I answered, backing out of our condo's parking space. We'll rent it out since we own it free and clear. The condo felt small when Amber and David visited, and I wanted our kids to know they always have a place to stay. It took about 30 minutes to reach Belmont due to light traffic on I-85, and another 10 minutes to reach the old district where the house was. My wife and daughter gasped as I pulled into the driveway and into the attached garage of the 2-story red brick house. Black shutters lined the windows, and although the house was old, it had been updated so there wouldn't be any cold drafts. How big is this place? Catalina asked, stepping out of the car and pulling her coat tighter around her. 4 bedrooms in the main part of the house with 3 bathrooms and a small apartment over the garage. I thought Carson could use it when he visits so he doesn't wake us if he comes in late, I explained, pointing out the side door and the stairs that led up to it. Catalina nodded. You wouldn't mind that, Carson? She asked as he stood by her side. No, I think it's a great idea. I'll try not to bring too many friends over, he joked, making me chuckle. We walked into the house and I unzipped my coat, feeling the warmth inside. Catalina moved around the large kitchen, probably imagining where to put the new appliances. Smiling, I watched Alandra copy her mother, examining the bottom cabinets. Alandra ran around the empty living room, laughing at all the space. I showed Catalina the only bedroom and bath on the ground floor, suggesting it would be good for Amber and David when they visited. That way, they'd have privacy. She agreed with a nod. It's perfect, honey, Catalina sighed happily. Now I want to see the master bedroom, she said with a playful grin. Thought you would never ask, I answered, smiling back. Look at all this closet space, Catalina exclaimed before rushing into the master bath. Oh my God, it has a jacuzzi tub! She was already sitting in it when I followed her in. The bathroom lights highlighted the black marble surrounding the tub, which sat on a raised platform. The shower was in a corner opposite the toilet, with dual sinks lined up close to the tub. This is just amazing, she said, still looking around. I laughed. I'm glad you like it. When we went back to the main part of the house, I called out, Alandra! Yes, Papi? Alandra's voice came from a distance as she ran towards us, playing with Carson. Let's go see your new bedroom, I said with a smile. Alandra nodded excitedly, and I winced as she squealed with laughter, spinning around her room. It was down the hall from the master bedroom. I also showed Catalina a room that could be used for a baby if we had another. Kissing her head as she rested against my chest, I knew she was picturing the future. It's wonderful, she said contentedly. Now show me the rest. Walking through the rooms, it felt like home already. The house was just right for us, and I couldn't wait to fill it with our family's laughter and love. Do you think you can handle this fiery Latina woman? Catalina teased, standing proudly with a confident smile. Her fingers traced lightly down the front of her shirt. She gave me that look, the one that always gets my heart racing, and she knew it. Oh, absolutely, I replied with determination. I watched her eyes light up with excitement as she bit her lip. I moved my fingers along the outside of my pants where I was trying to be comfortable despite my excitement. "Is that so, Mr. Hal?" My heart sped up and my pulse raced when Catalina knelt down, her hands resting on the edge of the tub. Her sweater hung open, tempting me to look closer. Her body moved slightly, catching my eye. "Are you saying you're going to keep me happy right here in this tub? Making sure I know I'm your woman?" I nodded quickly, watching her hand slide down her side. "Good. You should always make your woman feel special," Catalina purred, her smile widening. "I'd never forget that. It's important," I said honestly, seeing her smile even more at my words. "You sneaky old man getting me all excited like this," Catalina said playfully, getting into the tub and adjusting her hair. I almost couldn't believe how beautiful she looked. "I'll make sure to make up for it," I promised with a grin. "You better, or you might not get this close for a while." I groaned internally as my wife teased me, adjusting her clothes. "Honey, does the water work?" she asked, stepping out of the tub. "Yeah, why? 1 or 2? 1, Catalina answered, doing a little dance. I pulled out some tissues from my coat, which I kept handy for days like this when our daughter Alandra had a runny nose. I handed them to Catalina and closed the bathroom door. Alandra and I walked hand in hand downstairs, noticing my son's red face. "Something wrong, son?" I asked as we reached the bottom. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it," Carson muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Son? I kind of overheard you and Catalina talking. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to see how she liked the place." I chuckled at his embarrassment. "It's okay, son. No need to be ashamed," I said kindly, patting his shoulder. We both looked out the living room window at what would soon be our new neighborhood. "Carson, show me this apartment of yours," Catalina said as she came downstairs gracefully. "Sure, Mom," he said, happiness clear in his eyes. "I approve," Catalina said, looking around the open space. I saw Alandra dart into the small bathroom across from the kitchenette. "We'll go shopping for you once you move here," Catalina added, gently rubbing our son's back. I noticed how her phone chirped with a message. "Honey, we should leave soon. My parents will be upset if we miss Christmas lunch," Catalina said, looking at me. "Then we better get going," I agreed. Are you sure You're coming too, Carson. You're a part of our family now. Get used to it," Catalina said gently, patting his cheek before slipping her arm around mine. We headed towards the door. When we arrived at her parents' place, we were greeted warmly. Carson got lots of hugs and pleasant greetings. Catalina's uncle, who was nearly deaf and a former Marine, took a liking to my son. They started talking in military terms that I couldn't follow. I nodded to Carson as he was led away by Catalina's uncle while my wife and I went to greet her relatives. Alandra ran off to play with her cousins. I chatted with Hector and one of Catalina's cousins, noticing how Catalina glanced at me while talking softly with her mother and sisters. The 3 of them squealed in joy at something. I saw the approving look on my sister-in-law's face. "Amigo!" Roberto exclaimed, pulling me into a warm hug. "How's it going?" I asked, patting his back. "Doing good, can't complain? How's it having your son home?" His smirk told me he was genuinely curious, unlike others who thought I had been foolish over the past 7 years. "Good. Happy he's getting out of the army soon," I admitted, seeing Hector nod in understanding. "Oh? What are his plans after that?" Roberto asked sincerely. "He's going to college," I said proudly. "Where?" Hector joined in. "Duke," I answered with a smile. "Will he be coming home?" "I hope so," I nodded to Roberto, noticing my son trying to get my attention. Excusing myself, I weaved through family and headed towards Carson. I looked down as my son grabbed my arm and pulled me without saying anything. "Dad? Who is that?" Carson asked, curiosity clear in his voice as he pointed out the window. "That's Maria," I started to say. Then I saw the small star tattoo on her left wrist when she lifted her hand, and the sleeve of her sweater slipped down. She was talking to one of her cousins. They were identical twins, so it was easy to mix them up. Maria was married, Rosa was not. "Oops, my bad, that's Rosa. Why do you ask?" I saw the confusion on his face. "Maria is Rosa's twin sister," I added, watching him mouth, "Oh." Carson then asked me something he had heard Rosa say. I found it funny, but tried not to show it. I was a bit flattered that a young woman thought I looked good and said my son looked just like me. "Tell me, son, why are you learning Spanish?" I asked, knowing that Catalina's family didn't like it when people made fun of their language. "So I can talk to Mom and Alandra," he said. I couldn't help but smile. "Who's been helping you?" I asked. Carson was quite good for a beginner, and I knew someone must have been helping him. A buddy in my unit. When I told him why I wanted to learn, he was happy to help, Carson said shyly. "Carson, there's nothing wrong with wanting to learn Spanish," I said. I saw my wife, and she smiled at me. "I learned because I loved Catalina from the moment she walked into my office and told me to get my act together." I grinned when Carson laughed out loud. "But how do I talk to her? I don't want to sound dumb, you know." Carson sighed, looking out the window again. "Dad?" He looked at me in surprise when I waved Rosa over. "Relax, son. I'm just helping," I said, enjoying the look on his face. "Parenting can be fun, especially when you embarrass your child a bit." "Yes, Nathan, you wanted to see me?" Rosa said as she stood in the doorway. "Would you mind speaking in English while my son is learning? It wouldn't be fair if he didn't understand," I said. Rosa looked at Carson and smiled softly. "Yes, of course, Nathan. What shall we talk about?" she asked, catching on to why she was there. She wouldn't have stayed or spoken English if she wasn't interested. "Hola," Carson said, stepping forward and extending his hand. "I'd like to say more in Spanish, but I don't want to mess it up and make you think I'm an idiot." I raised an eyebrow at his opening line. Not what I would have said, but it seemed to work. "Hola, Carson. Your father has spoken a lot about you," Rosa replied, and I took that as my cue to leave. "What's happening in there?" Catalina asked when I reached her side. "Oh, you know, two young people from different worlds meeting in the night," I said with a grin. "I hope they get along. Rosa needs a good man," Catalina said, as we listened to her sister talk about her trip home to Mexico. When it was time to go home, I went looking for my son and found him in a passionate kiss with Rosa. "Have him home before midnight," I joked before they could say anything, seeing the surprise on their faces. Rosa nodded, blushing, knowing I meant it. Chuckling, I walked away. Who knew my son could move so fast? "Where's Carson?" Catalina asked, looking behind me. "He's being Romeo to his Juliet," I whispered in Spanish to her. "Oh?" was all she said, her eyes lighting up at the news. "She'll bring him home," I said, leading my wife and daughter out after saying goodbye to everyone. At 11 o'clock, there was a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, my son stood there, grinning. Shaking my head, I heard him say, "Best Christmas ever?" "You know, if you cheat on her, you'd better stay on the West Coast," I said as he walked off. My wife and I had stayed up waiting for him. "Are you joking?" Carson stammered. "No, Rosa has a worse temper than Catalina," I said, looking at my wife when she made a face. "And Rosa hates cheaters. Her dad cheated on her mom and left. So, if you want this to go somewhere, be careful," I said, giving him some fatherly advice. "I get it, Dad. Thanks for the warning. I won't be like Mom," Carson said firmly. I felt proud seeing the truth in his eyes. "Thanks for bringing me. Your family is wonderful, Mom. I'm going to bed night, Dad, Mom." "Good night, Carson. I'm glad you had fun today," Catalina said, standing up. "Good night, son," I replied, watching him head to his room. Tomorrow would be the last time I'd see him until March. "Come on, dear, let's go to bed," Catalina said, leaning close to me. For me, going to bed with her was always a welcome end to the day. Turning it down would mean I wasn't myself anymore. "I love you, Dad," Carson said as we hugged at the airport. "Love you too, son. Take care, okay?" I replied, patting his back lightly. "Of course, I gotta look out for my little sister." "Those boys will soon be around," he said, smiling at his blushing sister. "It's not goodbye, just see you later, Alandra." My wife smiled proudly when Carson said goodbye to his sister in Spanish. "You promise to be safe?" Alandra asked, her voice shaking. "Promise," Carson nodded. "Watch out for Dad, okay?" My daughter stood tall and nodded seriously, making me smile. "Call us the moment you land. I'll worry until you do," Catalina said as they hugged. "I will. You have my word," Carson said, holding back his emotions just like my wife. Ever since that unexpected call from Amber, Catalina had stopped calling them her stepchildren and referred to them as her son and daughter. I saw the pride in her eyes when she did this. With her help, We were slowly healing the hurt their mother had caused them. "See you all in March," Carson called out as he walked through the checkpoint. "Bye, son," I called, waving. After that, life was busy. We had to pack up our condo, arrange for movers, and organize our new home in Belmont. Finding someone to rent our condo turned out easier than expected. One of Catalina's co-workers needed a place after separating from his wife. It was ironic because he was leaving her due to infidelity, a small world indeed. We agreed on a fair rent, and then came the decision about yard work. Catalina called Roberto, who owned a lawn care company, and he agreed to help at a discounted rate. When it got warmer, he would help her choose plants for the yard. Alandra loved the new house but was scared at first. She would crawl into our bed at night. It was an old house, and strange noises can scare a 5-year-old. Eventually, she felt brave enough to stay in her own bed through the night. Catalina and I enjoyed the house, too. It felt like a fresh start. I talked to my kids every day and noticed that Catalina often did the same. Amber was excited to hear about the new house and loved knowing she and David had a room here for visits. The wedding was coming up and the expenses were high, so Catalina and I, as well as my parents, helped out where we could. But as the date approached, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. I feared my ex-wife might try to ruin Amber's wedding. Catalina reassured me, saying even a bad wife wouldn't ruin her own daughter's wedding. But she had never met my ex-wife and didn't understand how nasty she could be. We flew out a few days before the wedding to attend the rehearsal dinner, and I tried to hide my worries. Rosa came along with Catalina and Alandra, while Hector stayed behind due to health issues. I noticed Rosa seemed particularly happy and wondered if something had happened since Christmas. "Rosa?" "Yes, Nathan?" She glanced at me nervously. "Are you and my son dating?" I asked gently. "Yes, I hope you aren't upset," Rosa said, seeking my approval. "Just be kind to him. I don't think he's ever been in love with a Latina woman before," I said with a friendly smile. Watching Catalina's mother laugh at my response, Catalina lightly slapped my arm but was smiling too. "I'll try. He's like his dad, sweet, kind, and handsome," Rosa said, sighing. Catalina nodded in agreement. "But also a guy. We do dumb things sometimes." This made the women laugh even more. "So you don't mind us dating?" Rosa asked shyly as we waited for our flight. "No, as long as you both are happy, that's what matters," I said, feeling my wife's hand slip into mine. "But if you hurt my boy, you'll have to answer to his mom," I added, pointing at Catalina, who smiled in that protective way only a mother can. "I understand." Rosa nodded seriously. "So, how long have you two been dating?" I asked, curious. "Since after New Year's. It's tough with him being away, but I knew that when we started. I just can't wait for him to come home for good," she said. I shared her eagerness. "We're excited too," I said. "You know he's going to Duke in the fall." "Yes, I think that's great," Rosa replied, but I had a feeling she was holding something back. "So, do you have any plans for when he comes home this summer?" "Oh, I have lots of plans," she said with a twinkle in her eye. I knew my son needed to be ready. When Carson finally appeared, Rosa dropped her bags and ran into his arms. Catalina and her mother picked up the luggage she left behind. I had to clear my throat at the sight of their passionate kiss. Carson's Spanish had improved a lot since Christmas, as he greeted Catalina and her mother in their language. Catalina only corrected him gently when he got a word wrong, like a mother does, and I could tell she was pleased with his progress. I noticed Rosa looking away, trying to seem innocent. "Hey, Dad," Carson greeted me warmly, giving me a hug. "How are you, son?" "Can't complain. Better now," he replied, glancing at Rosa, who blushed. "I'll drop the 3 of you at Grandma's, and you'll be staying with Amber and David." "What about you?" Rosa asked as she moved closer to him. "I'm not subjecting you to my mother. No one deserves that," he said, and I had to agree. "I don't care, Carson. I want to spend time with you," Rosa insisted. She reminded me of how Catalina looked at me when we first started dating. "Rosa, you sure? It's a bit of a challenge," I warned. "I can handle her, Nathan," Rosa said confidently. I knew she meant it. "Don't say you weren't warned," I sighed. "Carson, if she gets too much, call me. I'll sort it out." "Sure, Dad. You know what Mom would do if she knew you were in town?" he asked, worried. "I don't care. I'm not letting her ruin your sister's wedding day," I said firmly. The 3 women looked at me, puzzled. "Mom, it's for the best," Carson said, looking at me. Why does she still care about me? I asked, finally voicing my thoughts. She thinks she can get you back and keep doing what she's always done, Carson explained. She's not getting my husband, ever, Catalina growled, showing her true feelings. That's never going to happen. She should have realized that when I left. I've definitely upgraded, I said, smiling at my wife and hugging her. Yes, you did. And if you see her, tell me, Catalina said, looking up at me. Of course. The only thing I feel about her is anger, not for what she did to us, but to our kids, I reassured her. Good, because I'm not letting you go, Catalina said. Glad to hear it, I said as I gently touched her back. Carson led us out of the airport, hand in hand with Rosa after picking up the bags. Carson, isn't that... I trailed off, seeing the minivan. Yeah, David's mom is letting me use it while you're here, Carson said. That was nice of her, I replied. Yes, she's kind, Carson agreed. Oh, Rosa, you can't sit in the back. You need to distract my son, I joked. Carson's dad. And the laughter from Catalina and her mother made me smile. Nathan? Rosa said, embarrassed. She quickly took the front seat when I opened the door for her. Well, son, we're waiting, I said as I closed the door. Catalina gently scolded me for teasing him. We dropped Catalina's mother off at Amber's place first. There were lots of smiles and tears between Amber and Catalina. David and I shared a handshake and a friendly hug. He thanked us for helping with their wedding costs. Then I stepped back to watch my daughter teasing her brother, asking if Rosa was the girl he kept talking about. I had never seen my son's ears turn so red before. It was like watching a funny movie without snacks. After the teasing stopped, Amber welcomed Rosa like a sister. David acted like a gentleman, promising Catalina that they would look after her mom while staying with them. Amber did express the same worry Carson and I had about Rosa staying with their mom. But Rosa assured Amber she could handle any trouble. I wasn't sure about that. Only time would tell how her first night there would go. Carson and I had a private talk in my parents' driveway. He nodded, giving me his word that he would call if anything happened during the night. After waving goodbye, I still felt uneasy. The next morning, I learned something did happen. It wasn't what I expected. Whoever the troublemaker was decided to bother Rosa when Carson wasn't looking. My son said he rushed into the kitchen when the man tried to force a kiss on Rosa, calling her names she didn't deserve. The man seemed more like a talker than a fighter, as Carson knocked him down quickly. Then came the strange part, the troublemaker's reaction. It made me nervous when Carson told me. Something was definitely up, but neither of us could figure out what. So, what are you going to do? I asked, pinching my lip, trying to understand the situation. I could get a hotel room, but then I can't keep an eye on Mom. She's acting too nice to Rosa. It's really weird. Tell me about it, I sighed, rubbing the back of my head. Oh, she's coming. I'll call you later. Okay, son, I managed to say before the line went dead. Is everything okay, love? Her voice always lifted my mood when I heard it. It is now, since you're here, I said with a smile, noting her shy look as she tucked her hair behind her ear. I thought about our special night, a memory I cherished. But just as she was about to speak, my phone rang. Carson? Nathan, get out of there. Carson's mom found out you're here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to let it slip. She heard us talking and Carson couldn't stop her. I saw the worried look on Catalina's face as she noticed my change in mood. Rosa, it's not your fault. It was bound to happen. Let me handle it. You and Carson go have a nice breakfast, okay? I tried to keep calm, though my grip on the phone tightened. Are you sure? I heard the doubt in her voice. Absolutely. Tell Carson to take you to the spot I used to take him for breakfast as a kid. Enjoy your morning. Don't let this ruin it. I put my phone in my pajama pocket, feeling anger rise. Honey, what's wrong? Catalina asked, worried. She's coming, I growled as I walked into my parents' house to put on proper clothes. I rarely use strong language, so she was surprised. Love, you don't have to talk to her, Catalina pleaded. But I knew if I didn't, she would bother me for the next 3 days. I wanted to get it over with quickly. It's now or never. If we wait, she'll ruin Amber's wedding or the rehearsal. I'm not going to let that happen. I spoke firmly, pulling a clean shirt over my head. Okay, but why that shirt? Catalina asked, suspicious. I couldn't blame her. It did show off my chest pretty well. To show her what she lost and will never have again because I have the perfect wife, I answered with a sly smile. And I don't plan to ever lose you.
Finish this today, then. I never want to see her face again,
Catalina said lovingly, placing her hand on my cheek.
You won't, as long as you're with me,
I whispered, kissing her palm. Her eyes softened as I did. Her lips welcomed me as I leaned in for a kiss. I gently touched her stomach as I moved past her. My love for my wife gave me strength. The anger from the past fueled my determination. I was ready to end this once and for all, not to let her down. I heard tires screech as she arrived. I walked out to confront her. "Hi, baby," she called, eyeing me up and down. "Do not call me that," I snapped. "It's Nathan or Mr. Hal to you. I made that clear when I left you. Come on, Nat, that's the past. Can't we move on and be a family again? I've changed, I swear." "You haven't changed at all." "Wait, of course you can't," I sighed, shaking my head. "You're right, I was mean and stupid, but can't you see?" Her voice trailed off as I raised my left hand, showing my wedding ring. "As you can see, I have a family now. I'm not going back to the mess you called a marriage just so you can go around having fun while I support you. You might have tricked me before, but not anymore." "Nathan, please, let's go somewhere and talk. I know I can remind you of how good we were together." She touched my chest, but I grabbed her wrist. "Get your hands off my husband!" Catalina shouted from behind me. I smirked as the woman pulled her arm away from my grip. "You should go back to the house where you like to spend your time before my wife comes off that porch," I said, feeling stronger with Catalina backing me up. "And trust me, you don't want to see that. This isn't over, Nathan. I will get you back. You can count on it. That woman can never give you what I can." She pushed herself against me, but I didn't react. Unlike before, she no longer had any hold over me. That honor belonged to the woman behind me. "See, unlike you, I don't cheat. You need to live with what you've done. Now get off my parents' property and don't come back," I said firmly. "Oh, Nathan, what has that woman done to you?" It seemed she didn't hear a word I said. "Don't worry, baby. I haven't given up on us. I know you have to keep up appearances for her sake, but I know you still love me." She ran her finger down my chest. I held up my hand to stop my wife from reacting. She was close to losing it, and I didn't want to visit her in prison. "Remember, we have 17 years together." Her touch made me shudder. "We still have 7 years to catch up on. But I'll go now. I wouldn't want to upset your parents. I'll be in touch, Nathan. We do have a daughter to see off at her wedding. You never know. We might have our second honeymoon." "Yeah, I'd rather cut off my own finger before that happens," I muttered as she walked away. "You shouldn't say such things to your wife, Nathan. It's hurtful. But I'll forgive you this time." "Bye, baby. I'll see you soon," she said, blowing me a kiss as she got into her car. It made my skin crawl. "Catalina?" I gasped as she tore at my shirt, trying to rip it off. She stomped it into the ground, spitting and cursing. "Let go of me!" Catalina growled, trying to wriggle out of my grip. "You still love her!" I laughed loudly at the absurdity of her words. "Because I know you, every inch of you." I softly ran my fingertips down the left side of her face, resting my palm over her heart. "You would have hurt her. I know it, and you know it too." I saw the truth in her eyes. I wasn't about to lose you. If I had to act foolish to keep you safe, I'd gladly do it again. You mean more to me than she ever did. Do you feel that? I asked, resting her right hand over my heart. It pounded wildly in her presence. She gave a weak nod. "Only you make my heart race like this." Taking her hand and placing it lower, I showed her the effect she had on me. "And only you get this response with just a touch." "Then," she started. "She must have gone mad after the divorce because I would never consider being with her again. I already have the perfect woman for me. No one can ever take your place, not in my mind or my heart." I rested my hand over hers, still on my chest. "In all these years, have I ever given you a reason to doubt me?" "Do you promise she's out of your life and there are no lingering feelings?" Catalina asked, her eyes searching mine. "No, the only thing I feel towards her is pity," I said truthfully. "I'm sorry, Nat. I didn't—" "Shh, it's okay. You got upset because you love me. I love you too," I said, hugging my wife close. She smiled against my chest. "Get a room, you two?" Amber teased from her car window as she stopped. "Dad, why are you standing here with no shirt on in the yard?"
Your mother dropped by." I saw Amber's face turn pale. "And the police weren't called?" Amber asked, looking at us in disbelief. "No, this smart man stopped me from doing something foolish when she touched my husband," Catalina said, holding me tighter. "As for why your father's standing half-dressed, I wasn't about to let him wear anything she touched," she said. I was thankful the woman had only touched my chest. Otherwise, I might have to skip my daughter's wedding for indecent exposure. "And why aren't you mad?" Amber asked, confused. "How could I be? I have my wife in my arms. There's no room for anger," I said, trying not to insult her mother in front of her. "Do you really mean that?" Catalina asked, looking up at me. "Of course," I said, leaning down and lightly touching her cheek. Our lips touched gently, just like they always have. "It's a feeling I'm lucky to know. You're stuck with me. No returns." "Wouldn't dream of it," Catalina whispered, biting her lower lip. "Amber, can you throw this away for me?" she asked, holding out my shirt to my daughter. "Wait, that's my—" "I'll get you a new one. Your chest is just for me to see," Catalina said, touching my chest. "This body is mine to admire," she added, looking into my eyes and pressing close. "True, but wouldn't you want a bit of eye candy?" I teased with a smile. "Only when we're alone," Catalina joked. "Come, Amber, let's have breakfast before heading to the spa," she said, taking my daughter's hand. "Nat, don't stay out here all morning. You know you're my favorite to look at," she called back. I smiled as they walked into my parents' house. Later, while doing yard work in my parents' backyard, I heard Carson's voice. "Dad?" "Hey, is something wrong?" I asked, seeing the look on his face and noticing Rosa with him. "What did you and Mom do?" Carson asked, looking puzzled. "Other than her strange idea she can win me back?" Carson nodded. "I told her I don't cheat and to stay away from my parents' property." "Why?" "You need to hear this," Carson said, handing me his phone. "Baby, your father and I are getting back together. Isn't that great? He looks so good. I know the last 7 years have been tough with him gone, but he's home now. We're going to be a family again. I know he thinks he loves this new woman, but we all know he loves me." I felt my anger rising as I listened. I couldn't take any more without feeling sick. "I don't know where she got that idea, but it's never going to happen. Your mom is obviously confused," I said, handing the phone back. "I had to be sure," Carson said, putting his phone away. "Don't let Catalina hear that message. I don't want my wife in trouble," I warned, already deleted. "Good. Now come and help me. Rosa might enjoy watching you work," I said, smiling. I saw Rosa glance at Carson with interest. He quickly picked up a tool as we started planting bushes and fixing my mom's flower beds. By the time we were done, we were sweaty and tired. "Don't tire him out," I called after them as Rosa dragged Carson towards his van. I chuckled, remembering my own youth. Then I saw my wife at the back door with a familiar look in her eyes. She motioned for me to come inside, knowing we had the house to ourselves for a while. I hurried to join her. The rehearsal dinner went smoothly, even though my ex-wife didn't show up. I was glad. I didn't know where she was and didn't care. As long as she wasn't there, that was a win for me. The next night, David and Amber had their last parties before the wedding. Amber came back to my parents' house after her bachelorette party, sleeping in my old room. Catalina and Alandra shared a room and I took the couch. When it was time, Carson arrived with Rosa and Catalina's mother to take us to the church. "You look beautiful, honey," I said as Catalina, her mother, and Rosa fussed over Amber. Her bridesmaids were busy on their phones. "Thank you, Daddy," Amber said, trying not to cry as she hugged me. "At least someone is paying attention," she grumbled, shooting a look at her friends, who quickly put their phones away. Just then, the peace was broken by a familiar voice. "There's my handsome husband." "Dad, please don't." "Not today," Amber whispered, feeling how tense I became at the sound of her mom's voice. "Relax, honey. I won't ruin your day," I assured her, resting my hands on her shoulders. "Nat, Nat, Nat, you don't call, you don't visit, you don't even text. I'm hurt." I noticed the bridesmaids instantly took out their phones again. I also noticed how Catalina's mom kept a hand on my wife to calm her down. "Mama, who is that?" Alandra asked with childlike innocence. "Well, hello." Her words stopped as soon as I turned around.
making her step back. I'll admit she still looked good, even if I would never be with her again. Don't talk to my daughter, got it? What part of I want nothing to do with you, don't you understand? You ruined our marriage. You couldn't stay faithful. You had someone else in our bed on our anniversary and dared to ask when I was coming home to take you out. Did it ever occur to you why I left? Because I realized I meant nothing to you, just a live-in babysitter. You can't even own up to your mistakes. You dragged our kids into your mess. How low will you go? Oh, I know how low you'll go. Amber told me everything. Be glad we're in a church. I saw real fear in her eyes as I walked toward her. Otherwise, I might do something I'd regret. Now either stand over there and stay quiet, or leave. There's the jerk I know. You make me so happy when you're like this. She whispered it, thankfully. One, for my daughter's sake, and two, Catalina would have lost it. Don't worry, baby, I know you're just pretending. I'll play along. I felt disgusted when she winked at me. Mom? Come on, there are some people that want to talk to you, Carson said as he walked in and took her by the hand. Of course, baby. I have to set a good example for my daughter. Have you seen your father? Doesn't he look so handsome? I nodded to my son when he mouthed, I'm sorry, as he led her out of the room. Sorry, honey, I didn't. That was awesome, Amber giggled. I think your mom needs help. She doesn't seem to hear anything I say. I sighed, rubbing the back of my head. Mom's been like that since you left. I know she's been forced to see someone. She kind of went crazy for a while. Mom, spinning on her heel, help make me look pretty like you for my husband. Amber, you're already beautiful, Catalina said tenderly. But I'll help bring it out even more so your wonderful man will know who he belongs to, she said, eyes on me. I felt it was meant for both of us. Of course, I knew who I belonged to. There was never any doubt. I thought I'd never do this, walking Amber down the aisle. But I was very, very happy she called me that day out of the blue. Otherwise, I might have been stubborn and missed this day. I love you, honey, I whispered to her before giving her away to David. He nodded to me when I placed a hand on his left arm. My mother placed a hand on my arm as I sat down between her and Catalina, who was wiping her eyes as Amber and David walked up the steps together to stand before the priest. Alandra was nestled between David's parents. She'd taken a liking to them, and they liked her too. I could feel her eyes on me the whole time, but I never looked back. I was glad Carson kept her at the other end of the pew. That couldn't have been easy. At the reception, it was touching to see my daughter grown up and ready to start her own family. That's life. Nothing stays the same. The real show was seeing her run out of the hall in tears and hearing Carson shout, "Why do you think I joined the army? To get away from you. You're nothing but a cheating woman, and everything that jerk did to you is less than what you deserve for what you did to Dad." I'd feel sorry for her, but she brought it on herself. After the reception, we saw Amber and David off for their honeymoon. Catalina and I, along with David's parents, gave them a nice honeymoon as a wedding gift. The next day, after saying goodbye to my parents and son, the 5 of us flew back to Charlotte. Life goes on. I only heard about her again when Amber mentioned picking her mom up from the hospital. Seems she nearly drank herself to death and got put in a psych ward. Not that I cared, but she's their mother, so I have to deal with her. After all, I have a son to marry off. On May 31st, he showed up at my doorstep with Rosa. I grinned and hugged him tight. I'd also be a grandfather and father almost at the same time. Seems I still had it in me, and Amber had her own surprise. Sometimes it's funny to see my 3-month pregnant wife chatting about baby stuff with my equally pregnant daughter. Spain will have to wait. And so, Rosa became a permanent part of our family. Carson is doing well in school, and I'm sure Rosa helps him a lot. But I'll let you guess how much she helps. Alandra has never been happier. She loves having a house full of people to talk to all the time. I must say, life is good. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.